Hangin with Mr. Douglas.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome back to Hangin with Mr. Douglas, where the premise of the show is past the point of asking whether or not it's real. We know the answer. The question is, what can we do about it? Is there a hidden spiritual ecology surrounding human civilization, positive and negative intelligences, initiatory traditions, and developmental pressures? If so, how does a person participate in it, grow in it intelligently without being deceived? And if it's true, then there's an even more important question. How would we know which ones actually have our best interests in mind? Because intelligence isn't necessarily wisdom. Spiritual power isn't necessarily goodness. A being that looks like an angel doesn't necessarily behave like one. And sometimes the most dangerous deception may not look negative at all. My guest today has spent decades mapping exactly this territory with exquisite detail, providing us the equipment to carve out our own paths while expanding our minds, enlivening our spirits, and empowering ourselves and each other in the process. Tom Montalk. I've learned much from him and look forward to continuing that education today. Referencing ancient esoteric and modern tomes as well as his own far-out and first-hand experiences, swimming far into the stormy ocean of consciousness and slicing through spiritual deception like a hot knife through butter. Tom lights a bright burning fire to synthesize spirituality and spiritual practices, alienology, alchemy, Gnosticism, Hermeticism, physics, psi, and beyond, and he explicitly propositions seekers to test against their experience rather than simply believe, and perhaps most importantly, to cultivate that discernment. Author of Fringe Knowledge for Beginners, Discerning Alien Disinformation and Gnosis, Alchemy, Grail, Ark, and the Demiurge, along with a wealth of detailed, insightful, easily digestible articles full of aid and advice on his website, montalk.net, not to mention his well-written and researched perspectives via his posts on X and many podcast and X Spaces appearances. Today, we're following the White Rabbit all the way down. Secret spiritual government, initiation in the mystery schools, Rudolf Steiner, Paul Brunton, Brahmins and Kshatriyas, Lucifer and Ahriman, black and white magic, and more, along with the possibility that some of the beings presenting themselves as humanity's spiritual teachers may be something else entirely. But underneath all of that are the questions I really want to explore. What can we actually do about it, and what are we actually here to become? It is absolutely my pleasure to have him here with us today. Tom, thank you for hanging.
Thank you, Douglas. I'm really glad to be here, and thanks for that amazing intro.
Well, thank you for the inspiration. It is absolutely my pleasure. Let's get right to it. But before we take the deep plunge, I've got to ask, what was it that first compelled you to pursue and put out the incredible high volume and high value knowledge you have provided the world with? What lit the fire for you, and what keeps it burning?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. Well, you see, when I was a kid, I had many different kinds of paranormal experiences. I had alien abductions with the Greys. I had demonic encounters. I had some ghost experiences, and my mom, and to some extent my dad, did as well. So I had a weird childhood, but at the same time, my dad, being an electrical engineer, he taught me the importance of questioning things and figuring out how everything worked. So he would show me his science kits from when he was a kid, little electrical engineering stuff, and we played Legos all the time, and I was always taking things apart. So I was trying to figure out how everything worked. But at the same time, I was confronted with these abductions and paranormal experiences. So that led me to the idea that reality is a very strange place, and it is a big mystery that I had to unravel. And so when I was 12 years old, that's when I got a library card, and I decided to do as much research as I could to figure these things out. And I read all the UFO books in my local library. I read the different metaphysical books. And it really put me on a path of trying to figure out exactly what is going on. And of course, as that famous quote goes, the more I know, the more I know that I know nothing.
Right.
Well, it is true, but I'm not satisfied with it. The more I know, the more I want to know at the same time. So it kind of has snowballed and compounded upon itself to where I have put together various kinds of models to figure out, how do you mesh science with paranormal, with aliens, with Gnosticism and alchemy and Hermeticism. I've studied all these things. And I've really tried to put my scientific background. I did college in, I double majored in physics and electrical engineering.
Wow.
So Yeah, that was kind of tough, actually.
I can
But
imagine.
yeah, but it did teach me enough math and rigor to be able to apply that towards these mysteries. So as the years went on, I connected with thousands of people online. I networked with numerous abductees and contactees. I've discussed many things with many high-level researchers. And so finally, now in 2026, I'm kind of going full circle, coming back upon what I initially started out, which is, how do you mesh the alien stuff with the spirituality, with conspiracy, with science and physics? And that's pretty much where I am. And so you asked me, like, what keeps my fire lit? I would say it's a combination of a sense of justice. I understand that what's happening in this reality is wrong, that there are forces here that are exploiting people's naivete. And that's wrong because it takes just a little bit of the right knowledge for a person to totally change their lives. And it's unfair for them to not know that and to therefore continue suffering. So if I can do a lot of research, figure out some basic useful information and impart it to people, and if it makes their lives better, then what is better than that? That's what motivates me.
Thank you for that answer. And that is actually a bit of a synchronistic moment. I discuss what you bring up frequently with my brother, and he is a fan as well, and was curious about your take on justice. So for you to offer that in that answer is absolutely wonderful. Do you have any expanding thoughts on justice as we can perceive and enact it?
Yeah, of course. I mean, when we talk about justice, most people talk about it in the sense of human law, like human justice. But of course, that presupposes the idea of a human system of ethics, which is relative, relative morals, which I don't believe in. I think there is an objective, spiritual, universal ethics, which
I'm with you.
follows, yeah, which follows from the simple fact that the only thing we can really be sure of is that we exist. I and you, when you pay attention to your own self awareness, you're aware that you are a consciousness. Okay. So that right there proves that consciousness is the most real thing because that is the one thing you can verify, even more so than your five senses. Because for all you know, we are all actually in matrix pods being fed these sensory impulses. So there's a chance that that could be fake, right? But being aware of yourself, that is self-referential and that is objective as far as you can tell. And so therefore consciousness is fundamental. And if consciousness is fundamental and I know that I am my own person and you are your own consciousness, so therefore there's me, there's you, there's others. So that already sets up a baseline, an objective baseline, which is that things exist. There's conscious living beings that exist. And I have empathy, I have curiosity, I want to learn, I want to experience, and I'm sure many other people do too. So if something comes along and tries to prevent a conscious being from fulfilling their potential, from learning, from experiencing, from being their best selves, that is wrong because it violates the very fundamental nature of what we are, which is consciousness that wishes to be conscious of things, to experience, to learn, to have curiosity, right? So if you abduct someone and you chain them up in your basement, that's wrong because that's denying them many years of their life and inducing a lot of unnecessary suffering. So you see, once you start understanding that, then you can already build a whole entire system of ethics, and from that, therefore, a sense of justice. But ultimately, justice is something that follows from empathy, from conscience, which is an intrinsic quality that we have as conscious beings, and not just conscious beings, but conscious beings that have a God spark. In other words, something that comes from a higher realm that is a fractal fragment of the infinite divine, which you can deduce that from religions, from mythologies, from esotericism, that there is something like that. And so that's what I build my sense of justice and values on. It is something perennial, something traditional in the esoteric sense.
Beautiful answer. Thank you very much. I can't wait to tell my brother. That's really great. Thank you. Well, all right, let's start our tumble down following the White Rabbit. I would like to begin discussing the secret spiritual governments and hidden traditions. You recently posted on X the book, speaking about the book, The Cloud Upon the Sanctuary, written by, and forgive me if I mispronounce this, Karl von Eckartshausen, which outlines the existence of an invisible celestial church of enlightened wisdom keepers who guide humanity toward divine truth. And this idea is also explored in the book from a slightly different angle in the book The People of the Secret, written by Ernest Scott. I would love to get your breakdown and takeaways in your exploration into all of this.
Yeah, so that's an interesting book. I only recently read it. I did read his other book, The Principles of Higher Knowledge, or no, not The Principles of Magic, I think. I had it a long time ago, and unfortunately, I cut it up and I scanned it to cut down on books. But now I wish I hadn't, because that book is like $100 now, used. But anyway, yeah. So I read his other books, and especially that one. But I only read The Cloud Upon the Sanctuary last month. And that is an amazing book because it's a very slim book. It consists of 6 different letters that he wrote to a general audience, but basically an audience that wishes to know about the existence of a secret spiritual government that exists in our world that guides human evolution for the better. Now, full disclosure, Karl von Eckartshausen, he was actually a member of the Bavarian Illuminati.
Oh.
Temporarily. He left it because he was just affected with them getting too much into politics.
Well, we can appreciate that. That's all right. Okay.
Right. Yeah. So his priority was spiritual enlightenment, and the betterment of mankind. And so it was it was after he left the Illuminati that he wrote this book. And so therefore, this book, I think, reflects what he wishes the Illuminati had focused on, but they didn't, because, as we know, they went down the conspiratorial route of trying to control things on a political level, which is kind of wrong. But anyway,
kind of, yeah.
kind of, yeah. Depends on how you do it,
Sure.
Yeah, it's fraught with danger and mismanagement, So, yeah. But anyway, so the book talks about the idea that for the longest time there has been a kind of brotherhood and sisterhood of people that are psychic, that are internally uplinked to what he would call Jesus Christ, the Holy Spirit. Okay, that's how he views it from his Christian background. So, because a lot of people they view the Illuminati as Satanists, things like that. But Karl von Eckartshausen, he came from the Christian background and perspective, and he was very devout. He was very pious, which is a good thing. But yes, ultimately he talked about this this body of Christ. Which so Christians nowadays, they call themselves the body of Christ because we are the body, kind of like the group or the congregation or the church of Christ. We are the members of the principles of Jesus. But he actually meant it literally in the sense of almost like not a hive mind, but something in a positive sense, like a spiritual brotherhood where everyone's connected with each other on a psychic back channel kind of a thing. And how, because of that, because they are uplinked to, they have the super sensible ability to tap into higher information from the angels, from higher divine beings, from Jesus, from the Holy Spirit, and other divine beings. And so they take their inner direction from that divine hierarchy, and they use that connection and they serve it in order to carry out the divine will within this world. Okay. Without them, without people like that, without people like you and me doing what we do as part of our destiny, the divine will has only so many outlets for influencing things here. Of course, it could just snap its fingers and make things happen, but there are certain rules that have to be followed here, certain aspects in order to make this game work so that everyone can benefit from it. And part of that involves free will, plausible deniability, allowing people to explore their own paths and not stepping too much on their belief systems, allowing them to kind of like just play it all out. So that's very important. And so that's why the divine will has to use channels within our world to express itself under certain contexts. Okay. And this divine brotherhood and sisterhood is one of those examples. There are many, but that's one of those examples. Yeah. So, and the question is like, well, does such a brotherhood even exist? Is there even such a thing? And to me, it is definitely something that is logical, because if you think about it, you look around, people are not all the same. We are all at different levels, different levels of experience, wisdom. Some people don't even look up at the sky and appreciate the clouds. They're always like down on their phones, right?
Crossing the street. Yes.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So some people are just not on a same level as others. And so you can already start to see a gradient where you have someone that's very low in consciousness to someone who's medium in consciousness to someone who's very high. And that thing keeps going up. It's like a mountain. It's like Mount Everest. You think you're at the top, but you're not. You just look up and there's like another mountain. So this tower of beings keeps on going up and up and up and up. And this spiritual brotherhood is like somewhere in the middle. Okay. And so you can imagine if like someone like you or me or anyone listening right now, if you keep living and you keep learning and you become stronger and more purified as a person and as a soul, as a spirit, then eventually a point will come where you simply cannot operate in a normal NPC kind of way like everyone else.
That feeling is stronger with every day.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure everyone listening can identify with that, because the more you learn, the more you kind of separate yourself from those who are still stuck in the regular average person mentality, right? The consensus reality, and it can become lonely. So you can imagine that. How long can that keep up? Because eventually you're going to start finding others like yourself, and you're going to start networking with them. And especially if you develop psychic powers and they have psychic powers, you can start communicating along the psychic back channel, and you're both very spiritually aligned and attuned and plugged into the higher divine will. Well, that alone is going to automatically form between you guys a kind of spiritual secret society. And it's not one where you have to go to the headquarters and wear like mysterious robes and do crazy rituals. That's like wannabe stuff. This is like the purest, simplest, most efficient form of a quote secret society, right? Now, if it can happen, I do believe that it has happened, because there has been enough time over the eons that humanity has existed for something like this to develop. Just as there have been dark brotherhoods that have developed. So, yes, I do think that they exist. And Karl von Eckartshausen, having been in the Illuminati and having seen different the kinds of levels of people that are there and beyond it, I think when he left that group, he probably got in touch by the real thing, the real, what he would call Rosicrucians. Not the Rosicrucians nowadays. You can get a membership. You get this home study courses and pamphlets and so on.
In L.A. Yeah, right.
Yeah, I mean, they're cool, but
They are.
yeah, but we're talking about the real thing that's been around for a very, very, very long time. And yeah, I think he was contacted by them, and that's what inspired him to write this particular book.
Cool. Thank you. Awesome. Fantastic breakdown. And lends itself to the publications you post on X and the social medias. Well, okay. What is it about the secrecy that is so necessary with these societies? Is it intrinsic? Is it necessary? Is there a way? I know you talked about psychic back channels kind of being an automatic way of introduction and familiarization. Could there be a way that this secrecy might be lifted in a more overt way, so that individuals with interest but without certain direction might find one?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, first of all, you have to understand why they were secret to begin with. Because back in the old days, we're talking about hundreds of years ago, the church would burn you at the stake if they knew that you were involved in something that they would consider heresy.
That's a good point.
Right? And just because they called it heresy doesn't mean that it was wrong or bad. Sometimes it was, and there was people getting up to all sorts of weird stuff, right?
Sure.
Yeah, but the church would lump that in with the actual legit stuff that was even better than what they were providing, so they didn't want any competition. And that's why they hunted down all the Manichaeans and the Cathars and eventually the Templars, got rid of it all, and they made up a lot of false accusations against them just to be able to justify rounding them up. But yeah, this is bad. So avoiding persecution, that's the obvious answer to why a group would want to keep secret, but that's not the only reason. There's also, as I mentioned earlier, in order for this entire game to work, this human experience, there has to be a level of plausible deniability in order for consensus reality to exist, so that we can all have these particular lives that we have. See, our society right now is glued together by illusions, lies, deception, even in small ways. People lie to themselves about their particular issues that they don't want to confront. Spiritual bypassing, which we can talk about in a bit. Things like that. And so it's all made possible by illusions, and so that therefore the more truth comes out, the more this illusion is threatened, and the more it eventually leads to a point where society as we know it unravels fully, and society then becomes something different, which is actually pretty great, but it's not what we have right now. And what we have right now, despite the level of suffering and injustice here, there is also at the same time a novelty to it, a unique experience. It's like, you can Okay, like someone who doesn't like to work out, you can tell them, hey, I go to the gym every day. And they're like, why would you go to the gym and punish yourself, make yourself sweat, and lift all these heavy weights for nothing?
I've used that argument, yes.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So it's a matter of perspective, you know. I think some souls are gluttons for punishment, or they want to challenge themselves in very difficult ways. And there's no better place to do that than Earth right now in 2026. As we all know, it kind of sucks, but it's got its good points. But it's tough. It's tough being here. But it's a small chapter in the path of our personal spiritual evolution. So you can imagine, like in school, a cram session or like summer school or something like that. You know, it's more intense than the regular curriculum. And so coming here for 70, 80, 90 years, it seems like a long time to us because we live within linear time. But if you are someone that exists outside of here normally, this is actually like a cram school.
Mm.
You know, it's a difficult, high curve of learning kind of place. But if you make it through, you wind up with like in a video game with character stats that you can't get otherwise because of just of the sheer difficulty that we encounter here.
Epic armor and weaponry. I like that. Well, okay, and that's an interesting point you make about what we kind of gather while we're here during the earthly cram sesh. Could you call it a kind of curriculum that we are studying? In our back and forth, you brought up the idea of the evidence of curriculum. What in particular, or what more specifically, can we discuss about this curriculum? How could people more purposefully seek out and practice and gain these awesome MMORPG badges for this curriculum?
Well, there are two different ways to learn. Okay, there's one way which is a passive way, where you're like a passive donkey getting whipped by life, and you're always learning retroactively, where after the fact, you know, maybe even like decades after the fact. Yeah, where you learn, oh man, I really should have, I shouldn't have been such an asshole to my kids, things like that. And people learn that in their 50s or 60s, and then what? You know, they only got like another 10 years left. But hey, they learned it. Great. Maybe next time, if they do come back, you know, it'll be in some part of their subconscious, you know, to be a little more nice to people. That's an example, right? So that's the passive way. But the more active way is to literally be a person who loves to observe and to learn and to contemplate, to learn from experience, to really ruminate on life and other people's lives, people that you know. If you pay attention to what they go through in life, you can sort of see that there is a curriculum there, that they are being guided sequentially through a very difficult path, but over time they get better. Except for certain people. There's certain people that they don't seem to have much of that at all. And I wonder, you know, how much realness there is behind the eyes, but uh, some people do have it. And if they do, then there are people that would benefit greatly from contemplating their life experiences and trying to extract understanding and wisdom from it. And it's kind of a tall order because if you think about it, a lot of people are in an almost trance state where they are floating through life. And so they're following the path of the donkey, getting whipped retroactively after the fact. And that's okay, you know, it's a slower path. You know, the better path, the more efficient path is to think ahead and to definitely try to extract as much as you can from your own life, from research, from what other people tell you, and to really engage life in a conscious, self bootstrapping kind of way.
Cool, cool. I like that. Path of the donkey is the longer path. It still works. If there were an animal that you could associate with the more active contemplative path, just out of curiosity, what could we call that path?
I would say maybe the path of the eagle or the phoenix. Phoenix because of transformation, and eagle because it has a higher bird's eye perspective on the ground below.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you. Yes. Okay, and so these particular qualities, they come with us, right? We don't take much with us, but it seems like they come with us time after time. Do you ever have any personal experiences of sensations or rememberings of perhaps these qualities that may have been carried with you from time before?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I know that since childhood, I have always had a very good intuition about things. Doesn't mean I'm always right, but when I'm wrong, it's because I didn't follow my intuition. So my intuition's good. It's just, I'm not always in full fidelity to it. But
Well, that's an interesting point. People that do have that intuitive sensation, that very well could be a strong indicator of an accumulation of qualities that have come before.
yeah, partly the accumulation of quality there has to do with your receptivity and your attunement to the source of that intuition. And the source of intuition, it can be many different things. And unless you're psychic, you're not going to be able to know exactly what that source is. Okay. Actually, intuition is a mild form of clairvoyance. So, because what you're doing is you're tapping into something that is beyond mere physical brain and what you've learned based on, things in the past. It's actually a perception of things happening right now, or even precognition coming in from the future. So, some of those sources, we would call it, oh, it's the subconscious. But the subconscious, that's just the Western materialistic functional description of everything that's not the conscious, which is which can be the spirit, it can be the soul, it can be the higher self, it can be other divine beings, or even negative beings that might be slipping in some false signals. Got to be careful about that. But it's many different things, and therefore, the more clairvoyant you are, the more you can tap into these different sources, and also to be able to identify which is which based on how they feel, their particular vibrational signature. But if you don't have that ability, that's still fine. You still have some basic intuition, and it is something that you can nurture. It is, and it's very important because it's pretty much your only reliable metal detector, I guess, for seeking treasures in what you're trying to learn.
Nice analogy. Awesome. Awesome. Well, that's cool. And that brings us into a little bit of Steiner, where he discusses clairvoyance and how he actually distinguishes between imagination, inspiration, and intuition as different facets or stages of perception rather than the candy wrapper of clairvoyance all around the three. But how could you help me understand the differentiations and how to suss out the different sources that come through our intuition?
Yeah, so getting into Steiner for a moment, we're talking about Rudolf Steiner, the German mystic. He was born in 1861, died in 1925. He started the entire anthroposophical movement of anthroposophy. And he actually used to be part of the Theosophy movement with Blavatsky, but he had he had a falling out with them and then went off and did his own thing. So that's the little quick background on Steiner.
Much like Eckhartshausen. Interesting that they have
Yeah,
parallel, like, nah, I'm going to break away. I don't know why I don't like what you guys are doing. I'm going to do my own thing. I got some good ideas.
yeah, it's an archetype for sure. Like, I mean, I've had my own little version of it, and yeah, it's a good thing to follow your own mind and to not stick with the herd just because, especially out of social pressure. You want to prioritize truth over that. So if something starts going downhill, you want to jump ship and create like a life raft for others to jump on and go off to a wonderful new island, right?
It's
So
better over here, guys. Trust me. They're not going in a good direction. Oh, cool, cool.
yeah, yeah. So that's Steiner, and he was a clairvoyant, and he had a background in science and mathematics. So that's why I like him because I'm also into spirituality and occultism and religion and so on, and so is he. And he was also into science, and he knew things about engineering, and he also had a very rigorous approach to it. So he was labeled an occult scientist. Interesting, juxtaposition of opposites, but it's an important thing. Now, it's important to understand that he knew the system required to make people clairvoyant, but he only revealed the safe half of it to the public. So when you read his books, like How to Know Higher Worlds or Stages of Higher Knowledge, Outline of Occult Science, all that stuff, that's the safe stuff for the public. And he knew of the more dangerous but faster paths at which he taught privately or in private discussions. And this kind of gets back to what we were talking about earlier with secret knowledge, which is that certain forms of knowledge are dangerous if misunderstood or misused or applied at the wrong time in a person's stage of their journey. Okay, it's like with self-defense. You can teach a 12-year-old how to use a gun to defend themselves, if mom's not home, but you don't want to teach that to a 2-year-old because their mind isn't quite developed yet. I mean, bad idea. So just because something's secret doesn't mean it's secret for a bad reason. It can be, but it doesn't mean it always is. And so he taught certain dangerous things like certain breathing techniques and energy movement exercises. He taught that privately because you have to actually oversee the person being taught so that they don't do it wrong and therefore damage themselves in a very bad way. Because if you teach someone and they do it wrong because of you, then that's on you. That's like your bad karma. So you want to be there to guide and control it. And therefore you can't just like put it in a book and put it out there. Like who knows who's going to read it and misunderstand it and damage themselves. So that's why. But anyway, he talked about the 3 stages of clairvoyance that a person develops if you follow his system, his public system. And the first stage of it, he called that imagination. Now, it's not the imagination that we think of as that term, where, think of an apple and you just think of an apple. It's not that. What he was actually referring to is a kind of objective hallucination, almost like dream visuals or hypnagogic imagery that can arise if you are able to enter that state of consciousness and start having ESP perceptions coming at you that get decoded by your mind in a visual kind of way. So you can imagine how if you start off with just straight up imagination, like visualizing a flower, okay? So you visualize a flower and it's kind of, I mean, you can visualize the colors and it's sort of 3-dimensional, but it's not as real as a dream. But if you meditate on it and you start sinking into an altered state of consciousness, that imagination can suddenly, boom, flash to real life. It can become like a 3D visual immersive experience because now you're starting to enter a dream state, a controlled, almost like waking induced lucid dream state. And as we know, in dreams, what we see around us is not 100% produced by you, the dreamer, who's experiencing the dream, but by some other part of your psyche, some other part of your soul that is generating the dream environment, okay? And so what that shows you is that imagination, as we commonly understand it, that's just something that you, with your little feeble human monkey mind, tries to visualize. Whereas in a dream, something else that's higher and more powerful and stronger has taken control of that process and made it more real than it could ever be otherwise, okay? So he talks about the first stage of clairvoyance being something like this, where you start having these immersive flashes of intuitive, not intuitive, but ESP perceptions that come to you as visuals, colors, symbols, perhaps. And he said, the difficult part is this. He said that if you are not at the same time also morally developed in terms of like your ability to concentrate, to be a good person, to think, just try to stay positive in life, to have a good memory and just to, be well functioning, then once you start entering the stage of clairvoyance, the images that you see tend to get contaminated by your own soul distortions that are being projected outward and then feeding back as images. It's like a person who's very troubled and they go to sleep and they have really bad dreams, nightmares, monsters, sick stuff. Well, a lot of times that's different aspects of their repressed shadow, part of their subconscious, of their soul, manifesting visually and symbolically through the dream. Well, the exact same process can also happen in clairvoyance, where if you enter the state of consciousness, those things can feed back and come at you as, ghastly beings or distortions of what you're seeing. And then the issue is that if you start taking that stuff literally, you might mistake that for demons or ghosts coming after you, or that some person that you're looking at psychically, that they are demonic, when actually it's your own shadow projection filtering through them and distorting it that's coming back. So it can lead to a lot of misperception of what's actually there. And so he warns very strongly that if you're going to do this path of clairvoyance, you can't just like work on your third eye or, like in the New Age. In the New Age, they talk about raise your vibes and do these energy exercises. But they don't talk about the third thing, which is the moral development of different soul qualities, mental qualities, training your thinking, your feeling, your willing in a way that is clear and systematic and together in a very harmonious way. So that's why the New Age is kind of a half-baked deception of the real thing. And that's why we got to be kind of careful with that, because it has derived itself from the original theosophical spiritualist Hindu literature, but it's simplified it so much and ran it through a bunch of drugs in the 60s and 70s, that what you get at the end is this sort of counterfeit version of the real thing. Okay, so imagination is just a visual internal state. Okay, the next stage is inspiration. And what inspiration is where you are able to read into and almost like hear the logic, the meaning, the information content behind what you're seeing in imagination. So no longer are you just like seeing a visual of different colors. You actually have you're able to decode it, almost like see the source code behind it and understand what it is that it actually represents for real. That's the next stage. And then the stage beyond that, he called intuition. And once again, these terms, they're not what we normally call intuition. He uses these in a very different, but in a very technical kind of way. And this sort of intuition is more what the Eastern groups, philosophies would call samadhi, which is personal identification between subject and object, where the blur or the distinction between them goes away, and you actually become the thing that you're perceiving. So what starts out, let's say, as an image of a flower with a certain symbol over it or something like that, which might represent something, becomes an inspiration and understanding exactly what that means. And then intuition is where you actually merge with the energies or the beings or the information behind it, and you understand it from the inside out as if it's yourself. Okay. So it's a state of oneness that allows you to understand the quote names of everything. Okay. So those were the three stages where, and they correspond to different paths, like the yogi, the Christian, the Rosicrucian path. They correspond to different things. And yeah, he was very systematic about it. And that's why I had to get into detail about it, because it goes to show that spiritual training and clairvoyance, it's not just as simple as working on your chakras. It's actually more of a functional thing, the different levels of perception. And this is just one system. So this is not like the only path to clairvoyance. There are other paths, including the ones that I mentioned he kept secret. But I did want to kind of lay that out since you asked about it.
I appreciate that. Thank you. That's a massive help, because I have been pulled towards Steiner for better part of a decade myself. However, I will also admit, while I am engaging in his writings, I am able to comprehend at a level where I feel as if I'm gathering what he is presenting, though when it's attempted to be discussed with others that are not familiar with the terminology or basic ideas, I feel like I sound like gobbledygook. And so thank you for making it that much more clear to be understood and conveyed. Okay, you brought up the yogic traditions, Christian traditions. Let me just look through my notes, because we're going all over these great places and I want to make sure I can hit the information. Yes. Okay, so when it comes to these different kinds of practices, mentalities, Christianity, yoga, Rosicrucianism, do they emphasize different aspects, pieces of the human being? Do they correspond to these similar capacities? And I suppose I am jumping ahead. Capacities like feeling, willing, and thinking. Is that right? Yes. How would you take these three different aspects of experience and synthesize the three?
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, let's since we're talking about Steiner, let's kind of continue from there.
Cool.
Because he talked about how yoga, Christianity, and Rosicrucianism were three different systems that related to this thinking, feeling, and willing kind of idea. And what he said was that yoga, so the thing about yoga is, of course, there are many different kinds of yoga that over time have differentiated into many different schools. So I'm not putting it all into the same bucket, but Steiner said that generally speaking, if you look at yoga, it involves meditation, concentration, stilling the mind, visualizing things. So it's a lot of mental stuff going on there. And that's why he associated yoga with thinking. Okay. Now, Christianity, he linked that to the quality of feeling, because there's a lot there that has to do with devotion, humility, gratitude, selflessness, union with Christ, mystical rapture. It's a very heart-based system, which is very important. That's what makes Christianity so distinct. Is that it is very much focused in the heart, or it should be. I mean, as we know with the Crusades and Inquisitions, I mean, it can go horribly wrong, but that's not the flaw of the system. That's a flaw of those misapplying the system. Okay? So Christianity was associated with feeling, and therefore Rosicrucianism, he associated that with the willing capacity. Now, there's a lot to be said about willing, because if you think about it, if you are motivated by your heart, by your spirit, and you really love what you're doing, you don't really need much willpower to do it because you've got this wind at your back. You're not like trying to push through resistance against yourself. You actually have this liveliness, this energy that just propels you along. So what is willpower then? What is willpower? Well, willpower is the application of your own free will in a continuous way. And free will, it only comes from one place, and that is your spirit. However, the spirit operating through the intellect, through the ego and the shadow, that can kind of misappropriate the faculty of free will and apply will towards its own ends in a very dark way. And so, for example, it is possible to cut off your empathy, cut yourself off from spirit in all ways except for that one quality of free will in order to have this dark willpower that kind of plows you through all obstacles, So you start working like crazy and stepping over everyone and you become a billionaire or whatever. People do that sort of thing and they do it based on willpower and not because of any heart-based principle, which shows that willpower is a power. It is power, fundamentally. It is power, fundamentally. And that's why in the left-hand paths of occultism, whether Crowley's systems or, left-hand tantrism, for example, willpower is such an important thing to develop. Because why? Because they don't have the spirit or heart component anymore. They don't have the lively energy that can propel them through things. They only have this other source of energy, this other source of power that they have to call upon. And that's why they develop it to such a great extent. So power, like all things, is easily corruptible and misused, but that doesn't mean it is fundamentally bad. It just means that it can be easily misused. So the reason I say that is because Rosicrucianism, if it is linked to the willing faculty, it's not because they are like black magicians that develop their willpower to, bend reality and control other people's minds. It's not that. They use willpower to overcome their own shadow, their own lower ego impulses. So that's what they use that power for. It's to slay the dark dragon within, as this like knightly hero, in order to use the blood of the dragon to become immortal in a spiritual way. That's a symbolic way of portraying it, as it has been in mythology. Okay, so the reason why they call Rosicrucianism the path of willing is because, it's because it's all about subjugating the ego and turning will towards in alignment with the divine will, so that you have your free will. You are you have a lot of agency, a lot of volition. You're fully in control of yourself, but yourself is aligned with the divine will and divine qualities so that you can act as a spiritual adult and do things that are spiritually correct in a way that is based on understanding, based on your own characteristic being, not having to rely on an external voice or book, telling you, hey, do this or don't do that because that's wrong. You don't have to follow the 10 Commandments because it's written in a book. You follow it because that's part of your intrinsic quality. Okay. So you're truly free as a being. You're free from your programs, your illusions, from your egotisms, selfishness, and you are truly spiritually free. And that requires the bending of the will or the refinement of the will towards a divine quality. And that's what Rosicrucianism ultimately is in its purest form. So yoga as thinking, Christianity as feeling, Rosicrucianism as willing. Willing being the most difficult to do because you're dealing with like a real power there. I mean, thinking is great, but you can't like bend reality with thinking. Christianity, you can bend reality with feeling, so it is a power. It's a higher spiritual power. And then Rosicrucianism is about willing, but not only willing. It also involves meditation, concentration, but also linking yourself up with the Holy Spirit or the Christ intelligence. And that's why it incorporates all of them. And that's why it is actually the most advanced of all three of them.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you very much. What would a kind of basic practice of refining the will be like? What could I take to work on Monday and begin to refine this this will of mine and
Right.
get into that process?
Yeah, so the ancient dictum about know thyself. So if you know yourself, meaning, well, there's a lot to that. I mean, there's many different ways you can know yourself. But part of it involves what is not you. So there are certain programs, reactions, triggers, beliefs, false limiting beliefs that we have that are not actually us. They were simply grafted upon us through life conditioning, social programming, what our parents handed down to us, even our genetic programs, our hormonal impulses. These are all things that are external to our soul and our spirit. So if you think that those things are 100% you, then you will always not see them, or you will rationalize them, which the dark left-hand path, that's what they do. They think that, hey, this is me, this is my will, this is my true nature. Nietzsche was one of those people, one of those philosophers that didn't make that distinction. And so a lot of left-hand path people, they love Nietzsche because he's all about being your true self. Which self? The lower self with the small s, or the higher self with the big S, right? Didn't make that distinction, and it's an important distinction to make. So one thing a person can do is you can list out, on paper, a notebook, list out all of your trigger points, your shortcomings, all the things that you notice are probably not really you, things that are probably grafted upon you. And if you think about them, you can kind of trace them back, like, oh yeah, that happened because my mom was like, didn't give me enough attention, so now I'm always trying to seek attention from everyone else. That neediness. See, that's a psychological complex that originates in something that was outside of you that probably shouldn't have happened originally. It's things like that where you can make a sketch, like a template of your false self. And then you'll notice in life, on Work on Monday, when that little button gets pushed, when that little thing gets brought out of you. And if you're aware of it, then you have a choice in that moment. Like, do I act on it and be my usual self? Or do I stay in control of my self-awareness and observe it calmly and then act from a position of that calmness? See, because when you do that, you're starting to cleave the darkness from the light. You're starting to identify what is your true self versus your false self. And you asked about willpower. Well, that's where willpower comes in, because in that moment, it's very difficult to feel your best self. You might have had an argument with someone, or something bad came up at work, or you're not having a great day. And in that moment, maybe you don't have the higher light of your spirit to call upon and feel good about. Okay, maybe it's just not there yet because you're too covered by the clouds, so you can't even see the sun. But you do have willpower, and that's what willpower is good for. It's for overcoming resistance. It's for overcoming darkness. That's how you slay the dragon. So the Rosicrucian path in that particular moment involves being aware of the darkness, identifying your own light within, and choosing through willpower to overcome that, and to be calm, and to be understanding, and to be a better self.
Cool. Thank you. That's a great way to just describe how to enact it in every day. Let willpower be your sword and your umbrella. Wonderful. Yeah. That's fantastic. Well, I mean, you kind of described what a balanced human being would look like when thinking, feeling, and willing are all functioning properly together. Is there an example in literature or popular culture, movies, anything that you would use as a kind of archetypical point toward that people could at least begin to model themselves after or shape themselves toward, if not completely identify with?
Yeah, there is. But here's the thing. Not everyone is treading the same path, right? And this is something that we'll get into shortly with the Kshatriyas and the Brahmins, and how there's different.
How do you say? Is it Kshatriyas?
Yeah, I didn't look up the pronunciation. I always say Kshatriyas. I say it better in my mind than I do it in my...
We're reading silently a lot, everybody. Okay, yeah, I got you.
Yeah. But so if you follow the K path, let's say the K path, cool. The K path, then your role model is going to be different than someone who follows the Brahmin path. Okay, the Brahmin path, if you want to know the best idealized version of that, you could point to Buddha, Jesus, some of these spiritual avatars that were the more ascetic type, like detach yourself from the world, connect yourself to the higher, kind of start overcoming your lower ego impulses and transcend into another higher realm. That's the Brahmin path. The K path is actually where you're in the world and you're trying to bring the higher down and exert its power over physicality. Okay, so that's more the warrior ruler path. So that's why these two different things, they have different archetypes. And actually, I did look into the archetypes of the role models for the K path. I didn't really find too many, and I think there's a reason for that. I think it's because so the K path is power. It's worldly power, in service of the divine. And because of that, it is something that would be suppressed. Because if a lot of people looked after it, they might start bucking the system. And, so the system prefers to shunt people onto the ascetic, meek, kind of transcend this world kind of path because it keeps them from meddling too much within the matrix control system. And funny enough, the higher divine forces, they don't mind that. They don't mind that people are being shuttled towards the higher transcendental Brahmin Christian Jesus path because that benefits that too, that entire system. Because let's face it, we are within a kind of purgatorial school or gym here. This is and our goal.
It's dodgeball in 6th grade. Yes.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and you're not the most athletic kid either.
No,
so.
I'm not picked first. No.
Yeah, you're not picked first. So if we can get out of here in a way that fulfills our purpose for being here, then great. So the higher positive forces are happy, and the matrix control system is happy because the people that are good are kind of going off and getting out of here. They're not really trying to change the system. But the K path, they're the ones that you got to worry about because they're the ones trying to bring the positive light here into this world and exert its power to buck any sort of corruption or, any sort of
injustice. Yeah.
Right. So therefore, I think that system has been suppressed, which then kind of goes off into a tangent about Christianity, like what happened there, because Christianity originally, it started off with the teachings of Jesus and Paul and so on, where it was a very, as I mentioned, ascetic, pacifist, nonviolent kind of way, which ties into the Eastern Brahmin path of ahimsa, meaning nonviolence. Okay, so these different monk, priestly, yogic demographics, they're very much about detachment from the world, nonviolence, being vegetarian or whatever, like not harming anyone or anything. And those things are right, but it can only go so far within this world before you start getting squashed by the predators that are here. Okay. So Christianity started off like that, but it wasn't until, I would say, probably after Charlemagne in I think it was 880s. So it wasn't after Charlemagne that chivalry as a warrior ethos started entering Christianity. And so that started right around 900 to 1000 AD, and then the Crusades really brought it out of the church, where the church started realizing, well, we should start exerting our religious power militarily as well. Taking back Jerusalem from the Muslims. And so there's many crusades and like hundreds of thousands and not millions of people died in this. But a warrior culture arose within Christianity out of that. But it wasn't originally part of Christianity. It was something that was externally brought into it by a number of different forces, some of them actually metaphysical, funny enough.
If you don't mind, can you elucidate on some of these forces that, like Zords and Power Rangers connected to Christianity? Yeah. That's very interesting.
Right. So this is something I've talked about before, and it's very interesting, which is that right around 700 and 800 AD, this was recounted in the book called the Comte de Gabalis, which is a Rosicrucian text. And it talks about how around the time in France, northwestern and central France, there were these mystery airship sightings. This was over 1,000 years ago. Okay. So this is a long time ago. So these ships showed up, and there were beings in these ships that looked like humans, and they abducted different people around France in order to take them back to their realm, their dimension, to show them what a great republic that they had. Now, these things, they were called elementals, so like sylphs, nymphs.
Undines, yeah.
Yeah, so people thought of them, okay, they're just elementals, which actually is identical to the Middle Eastern concept of jinn. So in Europe, they had the understanding of jinn. They just called them elementals. They thought that they were just nature spirits associated with different elements. Okay, but in the Middle East, they're understood as jinn, and they had a different, probably more advanced understanding of what the jinn are. But just to clarify, so jinn, J-I-N-N or D-J-I-N-N, depending on the convention. Jinn, they are humanoidish beings. Some of them do look human. And they encompass different ranges of different phenomena that are grouped together under this class called jinn. And what they are is they can include actual humanoid aliens, crypto-terrestrials, like offshoots of ancient Atlanteans that survived the cataclysm, and now they've got magical powers and invisibility technology. a person in the Middle East is not going to be able to differentiate between that versus, let's say, a humanoid alien from another planet that has phasing and invisibility technology, or between that and, let's say, a ghost that is earthbound and that looks human. They're okay. They looked at them all and said, okay, they can become invisible. They're not us. They're more
They're all
advanced, more
see-through.
intelligent.
They're all the same. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Now they did try to differentiate between them a little bit. Like, oh well, some of them they're more physical than others, or some are more positive and some more negative. But they didn't understand outer space. They didn't understand technology really. So they didn't have words like aliens or interdimensionals or things like that. But yeah, so that's what Jinn are. They're not demons, they're not angels, they're this in between thing. So you got humans in the middle, you've got like divine angelic beings up here, you've got demon type beings down here. But what's between the human level and those non-physical levels? Well, you've got the semi-physical thing. And those are the Jinn, those are the elementals, those are the non-human intelligences that we would nowadays would call aliens or interdimensionals. Okay. That's how that all works. So in the 700s and 800s, some of those elementals, some of those NHIs, they made contact with the people of France, abducting them, bringing them back, and those people, it's not funny. They actually were thought of as sorcerers that had been consorting with the devil, and so after these abductees and contactees were brought back, they were burned to the stake for consorting with the devil. So this whole like disclosure thing didn't work out. That's why you don't do disclosure when a population isn't ready for it, because things like that happen. And it got to a point. It got to a point where Charlemagne had to publicly outlaw, as if that had any effect, but had to publicly outlaw these Jinn, these elementals, from having contact with the people of France.
You cannot talk to us. Okay, all right.
Precisely. Yeah. But secretly, behind the scenes, just as nowadays with the secret government, with alien factions, they had relations. So these elementals did have relations with the court of Charlemagne secretly, and that is exactly in history where chivalry entered the stream of Christianity, and it came from them, and it also came from the Germanic Frankish mounted cavalry, who also had their culture of chivalry, but theirs was more of just a pure warrior ethos. And then what these elemental beings brought in, they brought in the nobility behind it, the virtues that chivalry tries to expound. And so then those two things came together and then became Christianized and linked to the Bible and being a good devoted servant of God and Jesus. And that is what became Christian chivalry and fueled the Crusades and fueled that warrior ethos culture that Christianity picked up. But then what happened after the Crusades? Well, 1500s, 1600s, 1700s, time goes on, and nowadays Christianity has reverted back to its original meek form without any of that warrior culture. You see? So the K path only entered Christianity for a certain period of time. And actually chivalry was already on its way out, I would say definitely by the 1500s. And and also maybe even by the 1300s, it was already waning. So only for a brief period of time, for a couple hundred years, was that impulse really there. And so the reason why I mention it is because we talked about synthesizing the different paths, right? And Christianity isn't just one thing, because for that brief period of time, it did have that warrior ethos, but then it got erased again. So if we think about the future and what the future should hold for a perfect path, I would say it's a path that combines all of these, that combines the thinking, the feeling, the willing, that combines the yogic mental concentration meditation path with the heart-based uplink to the divine, with the free will, ego-based subjugation to the higher divine will as well of the Rosicrucian path. All those things, mix those things also with the warrior culture, with technology and science. So you can almost imagine like an occult scientist warrior monk. That is the archetype of the future. And so where does this whole technology thing come in? Because that's not part of these paths. Well, it's because we are entering the age of Aquarius. And Aquarius in astrology is associated with things like technology, humanitarian ideals, networking, social cohesion, cerebral ideals, right? So that's what we're moving into clearly, whether it's on our own impulse or because we're about to make contact with aliens in an open way and just going to be like this technological infusion happening, or because of the AI singularity. Who knows? But there's going to definitely be a scientific technological component in the future. And that's why we cannot simply revert back to these past stages alone. Like we can't just go back to the 1300s where now all of a sudden everyone is a major likely like pious Christian and you're like flogging yourself. And that's just not going to work in the future because we are becoming too cerebral and too scientific and too technological for something like that. But we can take the ideal of having heart, of having conscience, of having an objective spiritual ethics. We can take that concept and wrap it or base our technology around it. Which unfortunately, right now, a lot of these effective accelerationists, they don't.
They're not thinking that way, are they? No.
Precisely.
Yeah.
They're not. No, they're not. They're going down the Ahrimanic or Luciferic path, as Steiner would say. And we have to infuse the Christ energy or the archetype into that in order to guide technology in a way that does not go down those dark paths. Because those dark paths, those are dead ends. Those are dead ends. This is like a game of pool, and that's like the pockets. You don't want to fall down to the pockets. You want to stay in the game. And so whatever comes next, we have to reconcile and uplift and synthesize everything that came before us and use it in its best form going forward, and then augment it with what is new, which is the science, the technology, the spiritual understanding that comes with that.
Awesome. Thank you. That is very insightful. It's also, what a way to build a D&D class. Very nice. But it sounds like almost a kind of Gundam-style expansion with technology and heroism and right action, right thinking, right feeling. We all aspire to become Iron Men and have our own Iron Men suits and operate in a kind of high technology, refined moralistic sense. Kind of.
Yeah.
Tony Stark's not the most moral guy.
Right. Let me cut in there real quick.
Please.
So when we talk about technology, technology is not all one thing, because one thing you'll notice about the current trend of technology is that science has been kept limited. It's been purposely handicapped by the CIA, by special vested interests, right? We know about that. And so they're taking this crippled, gimped science, and they're trying to apply it in increasingly sophisticated ways. Like, oh, let's make a faster computer chip. Now let's, do photonics instead of semiconductor technologies. Okay, big deal. What are you doing there? You're just like, you're looking in the wrong spot, and you're like looking with a microscope to ever finer grains within the wrong spot.
Make it smaller. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Or let's do an iPhone with even more RAM. Now let's add artificial intelligence to it or something. And the wrong path was taken 100 years ago, 200 years ago within science. There's different wrong turns that were taken. And so what we can do is we can backtrack, take a different path of technology that allows us to have more efficiency, more power, better standard of living without all this little minuscule trivialities that the current path is going down. For instance, let's say we had propulsion technology like anti-gravity. Let's say we had free energy. Let's say we had a way to grow food through some sort of energetic process where you didn't have to use pesticides anymore, and you've got much greater bounties than you ever could otherwise.
Copper wires, baby. Yeah.
Something like that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you can do that. Medical technologies that are energy-based, vibration-based, or something.
Yes.
And so you just need a small suite of these alternative technologies, and you can have a wonderful life without going down this transhumanist path towards darkness, this Borg type existence. And so I can imagine a future where, for instance, you want to have almost for people that want it, you can have a hobbit village where you've got your friends and you're merry and you're having a good life and your power is provided for, your food is easy to grow. That's great. That's what humans probably should be living, because I saw a thing on X the other day where someone was basically saying we don't want robots, we don't want AI, we don't want all this fancy space stuff, we don't want bases on Mars. We just want a nice simple life where you can whatever. He's lists out
good
some simple
food, hang out, and make friends. Yeah.
Yeah, and just really nothing wrong with that, because that is the stage at which humans primarily are. I mean, we are simians, right? That's our biology.
Yeah, we're social simians. Yeah.
Yeah, it's built into our DNA, it's built into our biology. And all the stuff that's been happening over the past 10 years with I'm thinking about McDonald's, how it used to be all colorful, but now it's all modernist and angular and gray and flat, and cars have turn all into black, white, and gray, and that's the only colors that are out there, and everything's become so drab. And what is that stuff? That's almost like an alien
Yes.
pattern that's being infused, trying to stamp out the human soul. And so if you think about what is the human soul is the cathedrals, color,
Yes.
happiness, vibrance.
Also Hobbit homes. Yes, the expression in all myriad colorful forms. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. But as I said earlier, not everyone treads the same path. So you've got the hobbits, then you probably got people, I'd probably be in that category, who are more like the elves.
Cool.
You know, I wouldn't mind being an elf
Get yourself
myself.
some Rivendell. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I would enjoy that much more than a Hobbit village. I'd be bored in a Hobbit village.
Oh, well. I mean, apparently, according to Sauron, the leaf is quite effective. So, take it for what you will.
Right.
I think a little bit of sharing and caring is always good. But yeah, man, wood elves hanging out in Rivendell, that's a nice life.
Yeah, so I can imagine humanity in the future splitting into the more agrarian, pastoral types of people who just want like a nice, simple life, and then the ones who are the more like scientific, exploratory groups. So actually, funny enough, Star Trek kind of depicts that future Earth where you can have your little cabin in the woods, or you can be out there exploring space. And if humanity keeps going the way that it is in a positive way, I can imagine it kind of diverging into that. So it shouldn't be, and it probably won't be this Borg type, we're going to merge with machine and erase the human soul. I don't think it's going to go that way. I think it's definitely going to go in a more positive direction, but there will be many tests along the way. But fortunately, there are people here who are like the little butterflies that stir up the hurricanes. They were probably here on a divine mission to take a different turn, to nudge things slightly in a different direction so that it does lead to a more positive future.
Okay, and I love this kind of conversation. Let's say the turns, the butterfly flaps work, and the next 10 years play out in a way that right now is not at all being discussed or presented or even considered in most social circles, mainstream media presentations. What would that progression look like, feel like, and what could we as individuals help flutter back to move it forward more? 10 years down the line, what are those nice spots that put us in this more Rivendelli, Star Trek-y kind of situation beginning?
Well, one thing we need most is really disruptive technology and disruptive knowledge, and disruptive knowledge especially. And why do I say disruptive? Well, it's because the status quo sucks. It's keeping people down. I mean, these lives are not what humans are meant for, obviously. So something
Wake
has
up, get into your car, go to work, come back. Yeah. That's not a life.
No, it's not. And people take it normal as part of normality because of normalcy bias. But in human history, the way that it is right now, it's very alien. It's not the way that it has been for most of human history at all. So it's very unnatural. So no wonder people are getting mental illnesses and cancer and
Burnout, yeah, depression. I mean, the whole, the Sunday scaries is just a little kind of a thing of it. It's like, I don't want to do this. Something inside of me is saying, no, no, no. And yet we do it anyway. So, okay, all right, continue on. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Mm-hmm. So the path going forward into the future, well, so here's the problem. The problem is that not everything that is going to happen is entirely up to us. There are natural factors, solar cycles, earth cycles, whatever the different alien factions have and their particular agendas about them coming in at some point and trying to take a greater level of control over this place. Now, if we were left entirely to our own evolution, that would be awesome because we'd be free of so much interference. We could put our best foot forward and we could have that exact future that we're talking about now. Unfortunately, there are higher, more intelligent predators that are eyeing up this place. And I'm talking about this planet, trying to make their move in order to consolidate power and turn this planet into a vassal state for their empire. Now, this sounds totally like science fiction. It sounds like total Star Trek. But the thing is, I'm an abductee. I've researched the UFO abduction phenomenon for decades, and I've talked to thousands of other experiencers. So that's the impression that I get from all the different data pieces. I'm not just making this up.
And there's quite a bit of data. No, there's quite a bit of research and literature on this. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but so because these predators are doing that, it kind of shifts the timeline up because we don't have the luxury of developing naturally at our own pace. Okay, they're trying to come in, they're trying to interrupt it. So therefore, there has to be an opposition coming in also to try to prevent that interruption or to counter-oppose it. So what that means is that we can still turn out okay. It's going to be more turbulent, more exciting, and more interesting than it would be otherwise. So instead of a slow crescendo upwards, it's more like, oh my God, what's happening? Singularity, aliens, cataclysms, whatever, and then stabilization. So there's this inflection point that we are heading towards, where there's going to be so many massive changes in such a short period of time, people's heads are going to spin. But that's exactly where intuition and an uplink to a higher divine spiritual source through intuition or whatever, it's going to be super important, because your logic, everything that you've learned, uh, it's not going to serve you entirely sufficiently, because everything that you've learned was based on the way things used to be. And
It's
when
not
things
like that
change,
anymore, right?
yeah, and when things change too quickly, you have to rely on something else, something definitely more nonlinear and more beyond space-time in order to get the leg up on the situation. But see, that's precisely, I think, why higher positive forces would allow that entire thing to play out, because necessity is the mother of all invention, and necessity is also the mother of developing new abilities and new powers and new skills. So how is it that humans will one day be more psychic, be more spiritual, be more cohesive? It's not going to happen naturally. It's going to happen in response to various challenges and catalysts that are coming our way, especially when it comes to discernment. You know, discernment isn't something that you can develop just from a book. You have to go through experience. You have to see for yourself and apply your intuition and see how it turns out, learn from your mistakes, you know, kind of dial that in through trial and error. On a collective level, that means humanity has to be facing some very ominous things at some points in order to call upon that discernment and come together and be able to overcome that. Okay. And one of those things, which is already starting to shape up now through disclosure, is the whole like alien coming out of the closet situation. And I've written about this at length. I mean, I've got my book, Discerning Alien Disinformation, which gets into...
It's a great book. It's a great... People read the book. It's a great book.
Yeah, it's free. You know, you can just go to my website, montalk.net, and you'll get it there as a PDF download. I've got it as an EPUB, as a TXT file. So,
though I've gained much benefit from getting in there and highlighting a whole bunch. So, I mean, you know, buy the book too.
Yeah, physical copy's nice. You never know how long the internet or electricity is going to be around.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, even like last night, my power went out here, and it stayed out for a while. I'm like, oh crap! Like, did something happen? Like, is this some EMP attack or something? And I was getting my stuff together, but then the lights came back on, and I'm like, well, I guess it's a good thing, because I don't want it to like go into apocalypse stuff just yet. But it made me think.
I guess not this time. All right, yeah.
Yeah, it made me glad to have my physical books, because if I could ever get on the internet again, at least I've got that. So that's why it's nice to have paperbacks.
Yes, I agree. Yeah, it's funny. So something similar happened here a little while ago, and you really do. You're like, is it now? Now? No. Okay. Okay, so very interesting. So like really the first of several inflection points that will squeeze us into a more refined set of individuals, a more refined species, this alien revelation. We're in the middle of it now.
Yeah. And this kind of goes back to what I said about how if there is one form of predatory intervention here, there has to be another counter intervention to even the playing field. Okay. And so part of that involves what I mentioned earlier about the secret positive society.
Yes.
Okay. And once again, it's not a secret society like, oh, they're headquartered in New York and like members go there, but you know, they do the rituals. I'm not talking about that.
Hand this way, right? Yeah,
no,
yeah.
We're talking about a psychically networked spiritual system that arises naturally from anyone who reaches a certain threshold. That's what we're talking about here. And so this is not even theoretical. This is like, if you look at the anecdotal data, it actually does exist. And there are like positive forces. I mean, even in your own life, okay, you can notice how you're given as much as you can handle, right up to the edge of what you can handle. And
I'm laughing because I completely recognize that. Yes.
Yeah. And then there's this invisible net that catches you if you're in the flow.
If you slip, if you fall, if you can climb, yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So things get pretty bad, but there's management. So if there were no management, if there were no control, things should go beyond the bounds way more often than they do. Is what I'm trying to say. Okay. So there is like an invisible guidance field in our life somehow, an invisible hand. And that points to a lot of things. You know, you can draw a lot of conclusions from that. Like, okay, well, who is it? Where are they? How does that work? And so when you start reading esoteric literature or you start researching near-death experiences, you get a glimpse of the other side and how there are beings on the other side, even like our own departed loved ones, you know, if they're up to the task, they might elect to become protectors, almost like your guardian angel of sorts. So those things can happen too. And there's a whole system behind it. But the point is that in our world, there are positive forces here that help counteract the negative predatory forces. but they are limited in what they can do by the requirement of free will and plausible deniability that keeps our system going. So, for instance, for you to live your life, you need a certain level of isolation from the other side. Because if you were 100% remembering exactly who you were and why you came here and so on, some people need that. They definitely do. If they're on a mission, they need that. But a lot of people, they don't. It's almost like they're under anesthesia in order to undergo this surgical procedure on their soul called home life. Okay.
The
And
surgery of life. Okay.
yeah, and if they woke up in the middle of it, well, they're still stuck with their terrible situations, and it just becomes unbearable, and that happens. There are people who get access to information before their time, and it leads to depression, it leads to schizophrenia in some cases. So, and it derails them. Now, in some cases, probably that could happen as part of their path. Maybe it's a path of self-mastery, so they kind of go through a mental illness for a period of time in order to learn how to control their own minds. So that's more of like a higher curriculum versus like someone who's like here to learn how to um, accept your husband, even though there's like mutual infidelity or betrayal in business deals or some sort of 3D level stuff. Funny enough, television reflects the dynamics of the metaphysics stuff very well because you've got crime shows, gang shows, like all like 3D level stuff, and you have other shows like a Lord of the Rings or some sort of fantasy thing which deals with more like psychic powers and stuff, which isn't part of our world, but it is part of another world that some of us come from. So you see, fiction a lot of times reflects reality in that way, and you can learn a lot from fiction, from books, from movies and TV shows by just watching them and considering what they actually truly reflect. Because some of these writers, they get their inspiration from those sources. Maybe they're from there, or there's beings from there that kind of telepathically transmit it, and then it becomes part of the plot.
Philip K. Dick, I know, talks
Yep.
about getting his information from memories from alternate realities. Are there any particular shows, movies, books that have inspired you and you have resonated with that you would recommend?
Oh man, I mean, I've got my time. There's certain shows that I really love that I do think are really truthy. Like for example, Lost, that famous show
All
Lost.
right. I used to love that show. That's great. It took us on the runaround for quite some time. I
It
mean,
did.
let's okay. All right, good.
But there are crazy things in that show, very specific symbolisms, especially in later seasons, that pertain to what I wrote about in my Gnosis book. Now, Gnosis, which I won't get fully into here because it's like a long story behind that.
Also a good book. Also a good book. Yeah.
That's an interesting one. But just to really quickly cover it, I tried to map out what I call hyper history of our planet in that book. And what hyper history is, it is the events, the beings, the realms involved in shaping our timeline. So, for instance, if there is a time war happening and our own timeline gets manipulated and reset and altered in certain ways, well, we can't rely on our own history books to determine what happened. We have to rely on things that are outside history. That's why I call it hyper history. And the only way that we would know about hyperhistory is about information from it that leaks into our timeline through mythology, through beings that are from outside of time that give that information to people that are here. And so therefore, from mythology, from religion, from different things like that, you can kind of reverse engineer what hyperhistory might actually say about what really went on before our timeline got changed. So that's what Gnosis is about. And Lost, the show Lost, it uses so many symbolisms that I talk about in that book, especially in chapter 8. And I didn't see Lost until after I wrote the book.
Oh,
So,
wow.
yeah, even though it came out before. So people are probably thinking like, oh, you just watched Lost and you wrote a book based on that. Well, no, no, not at all. So I don't know where that show got its stuff from. But there's a lot in there about, like, for example, the Holy Grail, the Great Pyramid, cataclysms. For people who've seen the show, there's this underground bunker. You have to go in there and then push a button every so often. Otherwise, the whole disaster erupts. Well, anytime the disaster starts to erupt, these Egyptian characters start flashing on this little countdown clock. And if you convert that to numbers, it's like 10,800. Or actually, it's like 10800 seconds or something like that. Is how often the cataclysm happens in the show if you don't push the button. And that's actually how long ago Atlantis fell. So there's symbolism in there. Like someone who wrote the show, they knew about this like mythology stuff and the real history of Earth and what actually happened. But I mean, it's fiction, right? But it's fiction that is instructive in terms of reflecting certain true principles that you do find within mythology. So Lost is one of those. I love other shows like Dark, for instance. Dark. the German
I've
show.
wanted to watch it. I know what you're talking about. It's a time travel show, yes?
It is. It is a time travel show. It's an alternate timeline show and a time loop show. That's a cerebral show. Like you've got to be above a certain IQ range to really appreciate that show. Because I know a lot of people. I mean, even me. You watch it and your head starts hurting. You're trying to keep track of all the different timelines.
Hey, flex the brain. That's cool. All right.
Yeah, but that's a masterful show. So that's one. What else? Gosh, there's so many. Like the Adjustment Bureau, that movie that Philip K. Dick.
Fun movie. Yes. Awesome.
Yeah, Dark City, of course, The Matrix, Truman Show. You know, it's just so many movies out there that really get at the heart of the illusion that we're in.
Great recommendations for people to expose themselves to begin to jog their own echoing thought. Very
Yeah,
cool.
if you want the full list, you have to go to my website, click on links. Is it links or is it resources? I think it's resources.
It's at the bottom of your books page, wherever that is. But montauk.net, well worth a visit, everybody. Yes.
Yeah, right. So you go there, you click on resources. Yeah, I think you go down to the very bottom, and I've got like Fringe Entertainment Master Movie List or something, and it's got like 110 different titles of shows and movies that I think reflect the truth in some way.
Awesome. And thank you for that resource. That is very helpful, very beneficial. Okay, so we did discuss the Kshatriya, the K path and the B path, the Brahmin path a bit. Is there anything else you wanted to touch upon there when it comes to taking all of that information, Grail Knights included, and leading us into a future synthesis because we cannot go back? Oh, that's a lost quote. We can't go back, I guess.
Right. So the important thing there to understand is that if you look, okay, so first of all, we didn't even cover like where the K path and the Brahmin path even came from. Okay, so the Kshatriya path, I said it correctly there.
Nice. Okay,
that okay, so
cool.
So that actually came from the ancient Vedic, meaning Hindu-Indian system. Go back in time, a couple thousand years, and their society was divided into primarily four different groups. You got the Brahmins at the very top, and they're the priestly monk class. And their function was to do rituals, prayers, meditations, freeing themselves from worldly attachments and desires. And they functioned as the central axis of a wheel, where they held the center. You know, they held the center that was uplinked to the higher divine plane, in order to anchor that higher divine vibration within the society. Okay, so they were the anchor, and then around them was the next class, which was the Kshatriyas, and they were the warriors and the rulers, and their function was to protect the Brahmins and to take the divine anchored energy that the Brahmins were expressing and express that in a worldly power-based way. So, you know, the rulers and the warriors. And then below them, you had people like the merchants and the craftsmen, and then below that, the farmers and agrarians and so on. So the different castes. And the reason why they divided society into those different levels is because, well, you can either do that, or you can have one person try to be everything, which is not that efficient, or you can just ignore order altogether and just have to be whatever, which is what we have right now. And so right now, yeah, we have the freedom. Like, hey, if you want to become this, you want to become a celebrity or a sports person or join the military, you can do that, right? We have a lot of freedom, but the efficiency suffers when you do that. But at the same,
can be more. It can be taken advantage of a little bit more, I guess.
yeah, exactly. Like, so for example, modern day India, they still have a sort of caste system there. But it's not based around any sort of spiritual principle anymore. It's more just a social hereditary structure. So if you're unfortunate enough to be born as one of the untouchables, which is the very bottom layer, then you're going to be a little kid growing up eating food out of a landfill. You know, you can be one of those orphans because society rejects you. So
well, okay. So that doesn't work out so well. But
no. So the thing is, if you want to have maximum social efficiency and order and harmony, you have to have something like a caste system, but you have to do it right. You have to do it based on ethical, spiritual principles, and it has to be around a center that is solid and truly uplinked to the divine. Which right now, humanity, it's not. Good luck trying to do that. It's not going to happen right now. But it will in the future, but not right now. Okay, so that's where those terms come from. And so the warrior path, it's not just that they were warriors. It's that they had an entire spiritual system behind it that was oriented towards that function. So, for instance, the Brahmins didn't really do much in terms of trying to activate the different chakras, trying to develop powers, trying to activate their etheric energy body, and and power themselves up to become almost like superhuman, because they didn't need that. They're trying to transcend the body. And that's why within the meditation and the yoga paths, they'll say like, okay, if you do these meditations, you might start developing the different siddhi powers, meaning SIDDHI, meaning your like, occult clairvoyant abilities, and phenomena might arise, but you should ignore those because they are distractions from enlightenment. That tells you everything you need to know about the Brahmin mindset, which is don't worry about all that power stuff. Focus just on spiritual advancement.
Focus on getting out of here. Don't worry about moving things with your mind. Right.
Well said. Yep. Yeah, exactly. Because how does that compare to Christianity? Exactly the same thing. What does Christianity say? It says don't mess with all that occult stuff. Try not to develop any powers. That's bad stuff, right? All you should focus on is uplinking yourself to God, to Jesus, to the Holy Spirit, and living a pious spiritual life, okay? Detaching yourself from this world. And so the Brahmin path versus the Kshatriya path, I said it wrong again, but the K path.
Kshatriya, I got you, K path.
Yeah, the K path. They're two different things, but they need to be two different things because they have different orientations. One points towards the world, and one points towards out of this world. There's a diametric opposition there, but it's harmonious because both are needed, because one is a protector and the other is the reacher or the center holder, I guess you could say.
Pillar builder, yeah.
Yeah, pillar builder. That's nice.
Cool.
Yep. Yeah, so that's pretty much it, and that's why the K path does involve building powers, using etheric energy, and also the use of technology. So that's another thing that I talked about in my Gnosis book, the idea that there are non-human powerful technologies, which I call demiurgic technologies. And not demiurgic in the sense that it's bad, like, oh, the evil demiurge that runs the Matrix. I mean demiurge more in the sense of like the GPU that runs this video game. If you have access to the code of the GPU, you can alter the video game. And so there are certain technologies that through the use of etheric and astral energy fields can reprogram reality, do things that we would consider magical or alien type abilities. Okay, so there's a field of technologies that is beyond the technology that we have right now, which is only based on material science, based on the five senses. It's based on something beyond that, the etheric, the astral energy fields, the occult subtle energy fields, chi, prana, orgone, all that stuff. Okay, so there are certain technologies that can do that. And technology, like anything, can be weaponized. And weaponry is the domain of the K path. So that's why within the K path, not only do you have spiritual training in order to make yourself more powerful, more capable of having worldly and etheric power, but also sometimes it involves the use of technologies to assist that, whether it's weaponry or otherwise. Okay, and so that's why Judaism actually is more of a K path than Christianity ever was. Because within Judaism, especially the Old Testament, there's really not much in there about pacifism and forgiving your enemies and
very true,
loving. Yeah, I mean, there is like love thy neighbor like yourself, but it's not like love your enemy. There's no like love your enemy in there. That's more of a Jesus Christ kind of teaching. So, and what else do we find within Judaism? Well, at least the original Israelites. Well, we find the Ark of the Covenant. We find a special Levite priesthood that was in charge of the Ark of the Covenant, and they had to undergo certain procedures. They had to wear certain clothing, including like a breastplate with all the different stones in it.
Yeah. Raiders of the Lost Ark did a nice little hay there. Yeah.
So they needed that sort of thing because that was their function. Their function was to exert power on a worldly, militaristic, etheric level. So not only were they warriors, but they also had a special priesthood that was more technology oriented, And so that's why we find that within the K path. And the same thing also within Hindu tradition, the K path there, those warriors, they were entrusted with divine weapons called astras. And these astras, they included things that almost had nuclear power type abilities. So in the ancient text, the Mahabharata, there's a war that happens between the different factions. And some of the weaponry described in there is very, very, very close to what nuclear weaponry is. They talked about how there's this rod of iron that could create such a massive explosion that afterwards people had to wash the ash off themselves in the river to avoid getting sick. I mean, that's like nuclear fallout, right? So they're describing things that happened a long time ago, probably not even on this planet, but it could have been, that involved higher level technologies of power that were militaristic in nature, and therefore were within the domain of the K path. Now, of course, the K path wasn't only just physical, it was also etheric. And that's why these warriors, they also did etheric energy exercises. And that's a big part of it. So it seems kind of complicated, but within the Hindu system, You have the more Advaita path, which is the path of the Brahmanism, of asceticism and intellectual meditation and contemplation of scripture and so on. And then you have the more tantric path, where tantra involves the manipulation of subtle energies to develop powers. That's part of it. Okay, so the tantra stuff, that's more within the K path, whereas the Advaita stuff is more within the Brahmin path. Okay, and so energy exercises, that is something that you would find within the whole like K aspect of it.
Is that like Robert Bruce's work, energy work, stuff? Okay, cool.
Yeah, partly. Yeah, it involves things like that. It involves yoga, for instance. So yoga, as I mentioned earlier, it's a bunch of different types. You've got the more like mental concentration, meditation path. There's that. And then there's also energy exercises, activating the chakras, like pranic yoga, Kriya yoga. Those are energy manipulation things that can lead to powers. And if you need powers because you're of the K path, then those are good for you to do because you want to enhance your capability in this world. And interestingly enough, within the Hindu system, the K path and those astras, those weapons that I mentioned, those astras, those divine weapons, you have to, as a warrior, develop certain energetic qualities within yourself in order to use those weapons. So it's not just about like, oh yeah, you like turn this handle and push this button and then energy beam shoots out from the weapon. It's not that. It's more like you have to develop your own psychic power in order to interface with a weapon in order to use it. So that was the path. And where else do we see that? We see that nowadays within the alien field. Because in the alien field, they have technologies. I mean, for example, they got like a medical device. It looks like a little metal rod.
Wand, yes.
A wand or rod, right? And they can use it to like slice flesh open, to heal a wound, to like diagnose, to alter the energy field of someone, all with one tool. And you look at this little metal rod, and it's like, what? Just like not even any buttons on it, no gears, no wires, no anything. Well, it's because most of the complicated function of it is within the etheric energy layer of it. So you're only looking at the physical object, but there's like a whole like etheric circuitry that's beyond the physical plane. That's where those functions originate. And the alien, using its etheric energy field, is interfacing with the etheric circuitry of the device in order to operate it. So the reason I bring this up is because the Vedic system. So within history, the Vedic system, it came from the ancient Aryans who invaded India and brought with them this powerful system. And they call them the Aryans, and nowadays we've got these Nordics and UFOs. I mean, come on, there's like some weird overlap there, right?
Right, yeah.
Whether they're time travelers
Suspicious, yes.
Yeah, there's something going on there. There's some sort of link back to that. Because it's all, did they have similar culture, similar teachings, similar ways, technologies, right? So I think those are examples of non-human or other human, more advanced human, factions influencing human history in a way. So even within like Vedic tradition, okay, they talked about how these divine weapons were given to human warriors that were trained in the alien ways of energy manipulation to use them in order to carry out their particular agendas down here. And they would call that like a divine mandate. So if you've got this divine mandate from heaven, then you're given knowledge, you're given powers, you're given training in order to exert your physical power here on the earth to accomplish that. Where else do we see that? Go back to France, 700s, 800s, where the elementals, the sylphs, they came down, consorted with Charlemagne's court, taught them chivalry, and that's also when the Holy Grail traditions started up in Europe, in exactly that region.
Awesome. Does it also connect to a little bit of the Camelot and King Arthur kind of? Awesome. Very cool.
Yeah, because the Holy Grail, if you look at the traits of it, it could manifest food. It could turn thoughts into reality. It had its own intelligence that would tell you what to do, and it was closely guarded. It was luminous. It had a very strong energy field. We see that with the Ark of the Covenant. It could manifest manna from the sky. It had an intelligence. It told people what to do. Had very strong energy field that if you weren't careful, it would melt you.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, okay, it didn't melt you literally. Like, I mean, that's like Indiana Jones like movie effects, but it did zap people. It did like give them radiation poisoning and things like that. So it was quite dangerous. So yeah, I mean, the Holy Grail was the medieval manifestation of the same technology or even the same object that was originally in the Ark of the Covenant. I pretty much determined that, and that's what I wrote about in my Gnosis book.
Fantastic. And also that the common depiction of the Grail as a cup is much more of a symbol. There is, as you write about, it could very well have been a kind of gemstone or something?
Yeah, so the Grail has been depicted as a plate that carried the head of John the Baptist, okay, or has been depicted as a cup that caught the blood of Christ, or the cup that was used during the Last Supper, or as a cup that contained a stone, which is very interesting. Because what that means is, it means a container for something, and a stone that links back to alchemy with the Philosopher's Stone. So the Philosopher's Stone is actually a form of demiurgic technology that you can do yourself if you know the method of, manipulating minerals and exposing it to lunar radiation in order to infuse it with etheric energy and transform it into something that is beyond chemistry and therefore an alchemical subject. But the point is, not to get too far off track, is that these technologies exist and they are known by beings that occupy other realms where that sort of thing comes naturally there because that's part of their environment. For example, if you are in the realm of the elementals, which is some other dimension that probably the Nordics and other aliens kind of go back to when they're not here, in that realm, you're more psychic. You have greater, the technical term would be you have greater quantum coherence over the condensate that makes up that realm. In other words, the superfluid or the quantum condensate. It's just greater quantum coherence. So therefore, telepathy is easier. You can manipulate matter more easily with your mind. Things are more fluid. Time is less linear. Okay. And if you exist within that kind of environment, you're going to have the kind of science technology that you have is going to be different from humans who do everything based just on their five senses within physicality, within linear time. And so that's why these demiurgic technologies are native to these other realms, but they can be replicated or brought here from those realms here to as an extension of those realms. And so actually, that's the reason why the Nazis were so heavily after trying to find the Ark of the Covenant or trying to find the Holy Grail and the Spear of Destiny.
Spear
and
Longinus, yeah.
Yeah. They were doing that. Why? Because, well, we know that the Nazis had technology too. They had anti-gravity technology. They had a higher science. But why then would they need some of these other powerful objects if they already have the science? Well, it's because they didn't have the, they weren't of the other realm. As humans, as physical 3D humans within linear time, they didn't have the level of access, permissions, and power that other beings have that are not even from here, or the technologies that are not from here. Okay, so you can imagine, how the Holy Grail or the Ark of the Covenant that is brought here into this world, which actually, per tradition and myth, it did say that it was brought here from the sky or from cosmos.
It fell through, right?
Yeah, it was brought here during a war in heaven, when a neutral troop of angels brought it here to Earth for safekeeping and entrusted it to a certain progeny of people that were, that had the K-path of the time.
Nice.
Right? So you can imagine how the Ark of the Covenant or the Grail that was brought here still has a link to the other realm. So it is an extension of that realm, and therefore it has the powers of that realm that you cannot replicate here using any Earth-based technology or method because our physics simply isn't of that order of things. Okay, it's like a cheat code or like a game genie from the old days with Nintendo, where you the game genie isn't anything programmed within the game itself. It is something from the outside that allows you to alter the game.
Beautiful.
Okay, so that's the Ark of the Covenant. That's the Holy Grail. To some extent, that's alchemy too. But the point is that there are things here that are linked to another realm that you cannot replicate here. And that's why various secret societies, especially the negative ones, they are trying so hard to find these relics, these objects, because it holds a power that they themselves cannot replicate no matter what kind of science they have, because they simply are not from that other realm in a way that allows them to access those powers.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's also why those technologies have to be entrusted and given by higher beings to the K group, because these warriors cannot produce it themselves, but they can be trusted with it to carry out the agenda of those higher beings. So a lot of human history, a lot of religion, mythology, it kind of traces back to the alien realm or the Jinn, if you want to call them that, or the elementals. They occupy the backstage of this reality. And we are on the stage with amnesia, kind of almost like they're puppet pieces, but not just their puppet pieces, but also extensions of the divine too. So that's why this world is like a chess. It's like a chessboard, and that's why within Masonic tradition, the floor of the Masonic temple is black and white squares, like a chessboard, because it symbolizes the game board of this reality that higher forces are kind of battling through us. But luckily, but we have the free will to determine which way it goes. See, that's the power that we have, and
well, that's It is awesome listening to you tie all of this together, man. You are piecing together puzzles that absolutely are widening the throat of connection to our higher selves. Um, a little bit of Paul Brunton. We can sprinkle in here. That connection that you reference, that free will connection, he talks about it as an overself. Is that a kind of way to think about our connection and being more intentional about connecting to our overself so that we can inform this chessboard a little bit more the way we would like it, not the way they would like it?
Yeah, so Paul Brunton, he's an interesting guy. So anyone who's into Rudolf Steiner or into my writings, I think you'll dig Paul Brunton. He lived in he was active during the 1920s through 1950s and 60s, I would say. That's when he wrote most of his works. He's a very smart guy. He's very contemplative, very lucid. His writing's really clear, you know? And what he talked about how, yes, we have this oversoul, or this overself, as he called it. And we would call it the higher self, but he made it more explicit in that it is almost like the nonlinear extension of our psyche. Or rather, it is the true part of our psyche that we are the linear extensions of.
Hmm.
You know? So like we are the thimbles on the thumb, and it is the hand and the arm. Okay.
Nice.
So here we are in 3D, and it is right there. So it actually occupies like 95% of our being, and we are only now 5% of what we truly are here as humans. You know, that's why we have amnesia. That's why we're like limited to these monkey brains, right? So he talked about how you still have this overself up there, and you can still connect with it by preparing yourself. And he talked about two different paths that you can use to prepare for contact with the overself. One path he called the short path, and the other one he called the long path. Okay. Now, the short path, that is the path of the Brahmin, where you're focusing on the higher divine power, and you're always constantly trying to align yourself with it. You're trying to always think about it constantly every day. So within Christianity, for instance, they tell you to think about the Lord with all your heart and all your might, and to just focus on Jesus or the Holy Spirit and God, and attune yourself. You know, that is a path.
Inflame thyself with prayer. Yeah.
Yeah, that is a path of devotion. Okay. And what you're doing is you're okay, so in the yoga Hindu path, they used a guru as an external human that you would subjugate yourself to or hand yourself over to, and because they are of a higher vibration, or they're supposed to be, you would advance by them carrying your weight. So they would pull your weight for you and bring you up to a higher level. Okay, and that's how that worked back then. Well, within Christianity, the guru is Christ. You know, it is the Holy Spirit. It is something outside and beyond that is non-human for the most part, and therefore infallible. And that's what you link yourself up to. And that's way more effective than the guru path, because, you know, as we know, gurus, they can be like sexual abusers and cult leaders, and you know what I mean? Yeah, they can be scammers.
Yeah.
Yeah. So with the Christ path, I mean, that's definitely linking up to something that is transcendental, as long as you can tune into the right thing. Like, obviously, there are people that are very prejudiced, and they can pick any scripture from the Bible to justify their particular prejudice, right? And they can create a version of Jesus where Jesus hates this or that group. You know what I mean? But if you're truly spiritually attuned, you can actually tune into that higher divine intelligence. And what Paul Brunton said, he said that there is the infinite creator. Okay. Beneath that, there is almost like a world higher divine intelligence that is more like cosmic, but is within the cosmos, and that's what you would probably refer to as the Holy Spirit or something of that order. And then there's something that's more personal just to you, and that's your higher self, or your oversoul, or your overself. That is something between you and the divine cosmic level, where it's a little more channeled. It's like your particular angle looking at the divine infinite brightness, the personified extension of that, which is unique and particular to you. That is your own higher self. Okay, it's like your entryway to the infinite. It's like your own travel agent to the cosmos, I guess, the infinite spiritual cosmos. That's what the overself is. And if you're spiritually attuned and you travel the long path, so the long path, what the long path is, it is the path of deprogramming, self-mastery, inner work, and just watching yourself. So earlier, when I mentioned that tip about like going back to work on Monday and trying to analyze your shadow impulses and triggers and that's an example of the long path that Paul Brunton talks about. And it takes a long time to deprogram yourself and to focus on weeding the garden, so to speak. Okay. But the problem is you can't only do that. Okay. And so within the path of, let's say, fourth way, which is the path of Gurdjieff and Ouspensky and all those guys, They talk about this thing called self-remembering, which is kind of like being lucid about your own stuff. And they talked about, demechanizing yourself, deprogramming yourself, watching your ego and shadow impulses and how mechanical you are, and trying to get out of this permanent state of hypnosis that most people are within. Well, they only really do that for a long time. And people that do that for a long time, they end up being very, very lucid, very in control of themselves, but also kind of cold and yeah, just kind of cold and hard, I guess you could say, cold and hard. Why? Because they have trained their willpower to overcome their own inner resistance, but without ever really kindling the spiritual warmth and heart that the Christian path advocates. So you end up with this coldness and hardness, which is incomplete. And that's why Paul Brunton says you can do the long path, and it's very necessary to do that, but you should also at the same time be working on the short path, which is a direct resonance or attunement or devotion to the spiritual warmth or the divine or the divine Godhead, the oversoul, the overself. All that positive stuff, you also got to kindle that. And so the issue within Fourth Way is that Gurdjieff said that anyone who comes in off the street and joins our school, you don't even have a soul. You don't even have the capacity to have this higher heart component. That comes like way down the line. So first, for the many years, you got to work on deprogramming yourself, demechanizing yourself. And if he's speaking to just NPC type people, he's probably correct. Okay. But there's a lot of people that would join a school that aren't of that, who did already do previous work in prior lives, who already have heart connection. And then they join the school and they're told that this heart connection doesn't even exist. And to only focus on the long path, well, you're going to become colder and harder as a result of it because your connection to the spiritual warmth is going to atrophy. So that's why you can't just do the long path. You also have to do the short path. And that's what Paul Brunton ultimately gave, I think, as his most useful advice, which is that you have to do both paths. And nowadays in the New Age, for example, in the New Age, it's kind of the opposite, where they tell you to, hey, raise your vibes and think of positive stuff. But they don't really do too much about like actual like true inner work, like true hardcore inner work. I mean, they do like shadow work, but the problem is a lot of times shadow work becomes a form of spiritual bypassing, where you don't confront the real issues. You're just always like boxing with your own shadows and creating more shadows and reveling in your traumas and so on. And if you do it in the wrong way, you can end up doing that for years, if not decades, and not really get anywhere. And same with people who only ever do like transcendental meditation. With the meditation, what you're doing is you're stilling the mind, and you're almost like putting your mind on pause. But when you come out of it, you're pushing the play button again, and all your shadow issues are still there. So if you only ever do meditation without the inner work, then you wind up like always reverting back to your base self at some point, like when it all comes back out. So that's why you can't just do the short path. You can't just do the long path. You have to do both kind of alternatingly, or break it up throughout the day, or kind of keep both in mind. And that's the only real way to kind of squeeze yourself through that portal into actually evolving spiritually if you go down this path.
Fantastic. I mean, you have covered quite a bit in the time that you have so wonderfully shared with me. Thank you. As we reach toward the end of our discussion, it sounds like, from our discussion so far, this idea of a synthesis of the short path and the long path, doing them in tandem while, well, and this is the part of the short path, but ensuring that we have this enlivened spark within us that we are tending to and giving kindling to, keeping it alive. So we've got the example for Monday on using willpower to, no, I'm not going to say that snarky comment to Deborah today. What would be an example of how someone could recognize and feed that enlivenment within themselves that Christianity and chivalry engender?
So you're asking about like what can people do to kindle those emotions, or?
Oh yeah, sure. What's an everyday way that someone could? All right, Brenda's cool. We got this going. How can I charge myself up? How can I pay more attention to that inner fire that is within me that Gurdjieff said, no, it's not?
So the important thing there is this, which is that if you intentionally sit down to reattune yourself. Okay, so for example, you go to sleep, you wake up, and you're not fully out of bed yet. You've got a couple minutes or something to snooze. And for a lot of people, they're already starting to think about the day. They think about their stresses and their problems and so on. Well, that's a real bad use of energy, because you're wasting energy and you're worrying about things you can't change right this moment. And also, you are doing a form of manifesting when you're doing that, where because you're in a sort of sleepy state and you're worrying about your fears and your anxieties, you're programming that into your subconscious. And your subconscious, which is actually part of, it's like a leaf to the tree of the Demiurge which controls reality. So it feeds through your subconscious into the reality generator, and it starts attracting more of those same fearful, anxiety riddled experiences into your life, especially in that state. So you got to be careful when you wake up. A little mini meditation where you focus on anything that warms your soul. It can be a fond memory. It can be a future that you wish you had, like a life that you're kind of moving towards. Like, imagine that life. If that life were right now, how would you feel? You'd probably be feeling pretty great, right? You can focus on that, or you can focus on more transcendental things like gratitude towards the divine or your own higher self for protecting you in life and then giving you this opportunity, this experience to come here and express your spiritual self as much as you possibly can. You can focus on things like that. And if you do it, and if you feel the positive energy arising, what that does is it kickstarts some momentum. Okay, it actually builds a literal etheric astral energy field around yourself. It creates like a thought form shield around yourself that propagates for the rest of the day. So therefore, when Deborah does her thing and you get triggered, that little momentum is already going to be there, and it's going to knock you towards it's going to give you a little extra boost to kind of pause and to not do your typical thing. Okay. So, and this momentum can be built up. So if you do it again the next day and the next day after that, it grows exponentially. And so eventually you're going to enter a state which Paul Brunton would call a state of grace, where you're in this state where you are highly attuned to the better part of yourself. So you're going to become spiritualized. It's almost like the spiritualization of matter with the Philosopher's Stone. Well, you become like that. Right now, you've got this higher energy circulating within you and around you that has a momentum of its own. And it can get to a point where it actually starts warping reality. You'll start getting good luck, positive people coming into your life, really amazing things happening, like a lot of negative karmic type, punishment type experiences start going away because now they're being displaced by this more positive feedback loop that you have. So this momentum is very important to build. Now, it doesn't mean that you're ignoring negativity or that you're ignoring the darkness of life. I'm not giving new age advice here. What I'm saying is this energy is an occult principle. It's a spiritual principle that you can build up as your shield, I guess you could say. And then with the sword being your discernment and your knowledge and your mind, so that in the end, you go through life not only through the power of your discernment and your intuition, but also a positive synchronistic energy field around yourself that brings you all the things you need in order to fulfill your destiny.
Beautifully said. Thank you so much for that. That is some good advice. Get your buff on in the morning, cast that protective, amazing shield, fall into that state of grace, and pay no mind to Brenda. That's very nice. Very nice. Here we are. We are basically at the end. Is there any other advice that you would want to give? We didn't get to a lot of the stuff that initially I had in my notes. That doesn't matter. This was an incredible conversation. I would love to do this again sometime at your leisure. Wow. Amazing. Any other advice? Any other advice you'd like to give that you think would serve us in the what we can do about it fashion as we move forward?
Yeah, so one thing we didn't fully cover really is the practical aspects of Steiner's concept of Ahriman versus Lucifer versus Christ.
Yes.
And this is important because, so the Luciferic force, okay? The Luciferic force is the force that brings light without warmth, that brings knowledge without wisdom, that brings liberation without moderation. Okay, so it's the idea that it's a thing that can liberate you, that can lead to transcendence, but that doesn't have it doesn't have a guidance system. So it's like a missile that just gets fired in a random direction, and it, who knows what it's going to crash into. That's the Luciferic force. The Ahrimanic force or archetype is that which tries to deny spirit, which makes us more mechanical, more material, that increases our worldly power, but at the cost of spiritual expression. Okay, so they're like opposites. You've got one that tries to bring us towards the metaphysical realms, but at the cost of delusion and escapism and imbalance. And the other one that tries to bring us into the material world at the cost of losing our spiritual connection. Now, the Christly path, according to Steiner, was between and beyond those, taking the best of both, where you have a balance between them, okay? And the important part about the balance is that it deals with a kind of wisdom, spiritual wisdom and warmth that you don't get in the Luciferic path or in the Ahrimanic path. But that is a balance between head and heart, balance between liberation and material responsibility. Okay. So tying this all back together to the Brahmin and the K path, you can combine those paths into one where you're in the middle, simultaneously looking up towards the divine, which is Paul Brunton's short path, while also looking down from where you are onto the etheric and physical planes and building competence within that, whether it's science and technology or some skill or some sort of physical health thing, or even just enjoying what you love to do, whether it's like creative expression through art or music or painting or gardening, physical things, things that exert your expression within the physical domain. You're not retreating from the world. You are expressing your higher divine power within the world. And that's what we need more than anything. I don't think we're here necessarily to take the Brahmin path and try to fully get out of here. I think we're here to bring the higher divine stuff down here. And the only real way to do that is to truly get in touch with who you are, your authenticity, and to express that within the physical as much as possible, and to leave no stone unturned, and to leave no base uncovered, and to make no compromises, to not have to choose between being a spiritual person or being a physically competent and well-off person. You don't have to be a poor ascetic in order to be spiritual. You can be financially comfortable. You can have, like I do, like scientific equipment and physical things. You can do that. You can do both. You don't have to choose one or the other. But the point is, you need to maximize your potential, whatever it is, whatever path you're on, and explore that path. Know yourself. Know what's not you. Distinguish between the two, and keep nurturing what you actually are, and to just kind of get into character and go with your story arc and just enjoy the story while you're in it.
Fantastic. Enjoy the story arc and bring the divine down to here, where we have decided to be. Tom, I cannot appreciate you enough. Thank you so much for hanging. Everybody go to montalk.net. Visit his website. It is well worth your time. Read his books. Highly recommended. I have learned a lot. Is there anything else you would like to share with the people, to point out any projects you're working on?
Well, I've got another Twitter space coming up in a couple weeks, so September 3rd, I think, and maybe if you guys want to hear more, then just attend that one.
Yep. I'll be there. Awesome. Fantastic, Tom. Thank you very much. Thank you for hanging. Hey, oh my goodness. Yes, that was an awesome episode. So much good information. Thank you, Tom, for joining me on Hanging with Mr. Douglas and providing us with your wisdom. Let's get right to it. Right at the top, Tom brings up the justice point, which I thought was a fantastic synchronicity. Again, I do talk about that a lot with my brother. He brings it up, I bring it up. It's a talking point between us. And Tom breaks it down clean and clear. We can only really be sure of one thing, and that is we exist. Consciousness is primary. And since consciousness is primary, there's me, there's you, there's others, we all exist as a baseline. So if I, being a being that exists vis-a-vis consciousness, if I have empathy, if I have curiosity, a desire to learn and grow, which seems to be fundamental to consciousness, because I exist and you exist, it's a safe assumption to think that others would have that kind of penchant as well. Again, if we're all baseline consciousness. So, if someone or something comes along and tries to prevent that growth, that curiosity, from being experienced, from people reaching and striving for their best selves, well, that's wrong. That's injustice. Now, from there, you can build a whole system of ethics, and from that, a sense of justice. And that is well defined. I am on board. I appreciated the furthering clarification on how we can accumulate the qualities that Tom speaks of in this Earth Life Cram Sesh curriculum we're here for. There's the passive way, the donkey path, where you have experiences, you go through it, and through that process, slow and steady, akin to learning through going through a gauntlet, taking a beating, you come out better. But the more active way is to be a person that loves to observe, to be curious, to be contemplative. Like that Mr. Rogers song, it's good to be curious about many things. That's Garden of Your Mind fantastic auto-tune from early 2010s. It's easier said than done. It's a tall order. Modern life has put a lot of us in a trance state of comfort and convenience. But still, it's good to be curious. Be curious. That is the active path. I like the title animal that Tom gave for the active path, the phoenix or eagle path, the phoenix eagle path. You got the donkey path, you got the phoenix eagle path. Let's fly. The point that he made about the sensation of intuition itself very well could be an indicator of qualities accumulated through past experiences. I thought that was interesting, from our before four lives. If you've got the spidey sense tingles, that's something you very well may have brought with you. And just because something is secret doesn't mean that it's secret for a bad reason. Referencing the secret spiritual government that Tom began to talk about at the opening. And I appreciated his example of keeping something secret. You can teach a 12-year-old how to shoot a gun, and they'll be able to defend a home if need be. But telling that to a 2-year-old might not take the way that you would want it, just because they're not ready for that information. I would have needed quite a bit of expensive and extensive training as a 12-year-old, but I get his point. And getting into Steiner's terms and teachings, I very much appreciated this. I am a massive fan of Rudolf Steiner. His book, Start Now, has just a plethora of fantastic meditations and exercises and techniques to employ. But again, as I had stated, when trying to discuss Steiner in basic terms with people who are unfamiliar, it at least for me, becomes a little difficult. So thank you, Tom, for that. When it comes to imagination, beyond me saying pink elephant and a pink elephant popping into your mind, imagination with a capital I is more of an objective hallucination, a guided daydream, like dream visuals. In other words, quite vivid, where extrasensory perception info comes in and gets decoded by your system as visuals. This part of the discussion harkens back to what Z was talking about when utilizing the imagination in a meditative state to enter into the astral. There was a lot of interesting correlation and some connection there, I thought. Tom continues stating that something else higher and more powerful or stronger has taken the reins of that process, making the visualizations, the experience more real than it ever would have been otherwise. A way to test and sense whether or not it's you or if this might be something a little bit more capital I imagination. So this is the first stage of the candy wrapper of clairvoyance. The difficulty here is that if you aren't already morally developed, i.e. not a douchebag, then these images tend to get contaminated by your own soul distortions that are being projected outward and fed back as images. If you aren't on the up and up and you know this is happening, then this can be taken literally as demons or ghosts coming at you. Or being superimposed upon others. Tom gives us a good heads up that the New Age literature doesn't really account for this. And, you can do energy work and raise your vibes, but if you aren't working on yourself, you might train yourself into lopsidedness and be underprepared for some of these experiences. Like the dude at the gym who's got a giant upper body and little itty-bitty chicken legs. Yeah. Inspiration is the next stage, where you can gain an understanding of the meaning of the content you see in the capital I imagination, decoding the meaning behind the symbol with inspiration. And then the third stage, intuition, not the popular or colloquial definition, but more along the lines, Tom tells us, of samadhi, where the identification between subject and object blends, blurs, and you become the thing that you are observing, understanding it from the inside out, understanding its names, understanding its nature. And yes, there was an interesting post on X, which I will read here, that echoes this capacity. It was, and let me pull it up, a post by Ruby at Observe by Proxy, the number 7. She writes, "What if I told you that our vessels are interchangeable, that consciousness can be localized anywhere or any when, if you know how? There are individuals who can see through the eyes of another." There's that third piece talking about intuition, place themselves into someone else's body vessel. Not only can they see through that person's eyes in real time, but their most precious belonging becomes accessible, their memories. You can just click right through, like moseying your fingers over the top of the files in a filing cabinet, getting a glimpse at each one, and delve in further, if you like. Your fundamental awareness remains intact while taking on the full identity and body of another. Maintain that for long enough, of course, localizing a consciousness to a separate vessel from yours, and what do you get? She says immortality. The boundary between what we are as humans and the higher realm is blurring. Some humans have a foot in both realms and can walk both, and they know that the realms are becoming something they were never meant to be, never made to be. Of course, nature has its own built-in firewall in order to restore entropy to its rightful place, to keep the structure of reality and the cosmos in check, and from running away with itself. We live in an entropic universe, after all. Everything grows in complexity, but only to a point. Without restoration, reset, or boundaries in an entropic universe, what would form be? Great brain food to consider, and I just wanted to bring that in because the discussion of samadhi, of that as an ability, is being spoken about, being talked about across X. Here, Ruby brings it up in particular. To summarize, Tom says that these are the three aspects that culminate in a state of oneness, allowing you to understand something from the inside out. Moving on, Tom says, and I'll agree, that spiritual training is more of a functional practice, not simply raising your vibes. There is something that we can do here that can be measured and practiced and improved upon in a fairly systematic way, and that is one of the big reasons why I am here, to discover what we can do and begin to implement with you and what we can do about it so that we can get better, we can grow. And Tom gave us so much good stuff when it comes to that exploration. He does also say that there are other paths to do this, to awaken these abilities within ourselves, but this, according to Steiner, is the safe and steady path. It did take me a little bit to get through my notes to get to there, but I did like the insight comparing thinking, feeling, and willing to yoga, Christianity, and Rosicrucianism. Now, Steiner's got a lot of good stuff. Love that definition of willpower Tom gives us. Willpower is the application of your own free will in a continuous way. But free will, via spirit, operating through only the intellect, the ego, the shadow, can pinch and twist the faculty of free will to its own ends, sometimes in not so great ways. The willing part that corresponds to the Rosicrucianism is cultivated to overcome their own shadow, to subjugate the ego, to turn the will towards alignment with the divine will. So cultivating and, importantly, balancing thinking, feeling, and willing matures you to become a spiritual adult, refining the will into a divine quality. I like that. Like, shaping a gem. How to begin to refine that will? Tom goes back to the ancient yet always at the center of relevance saying, know thyself. And there's a lot that's stuck to you, that's been grafted, that's not you, through conditioning by society, through culture, your parents. Tom said even genetic programming. To strengthen willpower, once you know yourself from recognizing all the aspects that you are not, do a getting to know your triggers session and list them out. That's one certain way of being able to get to know yourself. And the rubber hits the road discussion was quite good on Monday. When you feel that trigger of irritation, that I have to go somewhere I don't want to be, I have to do something I don't want to do, that it irritates me, that it'll make me get short, it'll make me get frustrating. You choose instead, and in spite of feeling like shit, like less than yourself, to chill, to breathe, stay silent. This willpower to not snap back at Brenda is real. It is there for you to activate. It may not feel like anything because willpower isn't a feeling. It's not that feeling portion that Tom talked about, but it's power. And willpower can overcome resistance. And that got us right into the Kshatriyas and the Brahmins. The Brahmins, as an example, archetype, Buddha, Jesus, the hermit, the aesthetic path, the path of removal and transcendence of self. And the Kshatriya, or the K path, which I like, you're in this world, you aren't going anywhere, you are bringing that higher spiritual life down here. More of the holy warrior, the warrior monk, the paladin. It's worldly power in service of the divine. Really interesting convo on the Christianity getting that temporary upgrade of chivalry from elsewhere. I thought that was really fascinating. The Comte de Gabelet book talking about these elementals giving information over, trying to upgrade humanity. You know, how it was that there was a European airship shuttling, and I didn't know, and I hadn't made the connection that elementals or nature spirits could also be looked at as jinn from another lens. That is a fascinating connection and makes a lot of sense to me. Tom says we would know them and what they actually are as cryptoterrestrials, ancient Atlanteans. They exist at the level between the human and non-physical level, the physical and non-physical level. And I also thought it was interesting if the European elementals, and they have their nature spirit associations with color. In the previous episode where I discussed the Jinn and how they have color associations with them, I wonder if those correspondences connect as well. Yellow for air, green for earth, blue for water, red for fire. And the whole, these elementals, these jinn, these beings existing in that in-between space, that resonates with, and I can correct myself now, it resonates with Dr. Corrado Malagna's, Malagna's, Malagna, his work. That is the work that was actually mentioning the aliens moving us in between the movie frames, and that's where they exist naturally. I had associated Corrado Malagna's work with Umberto Di Grazia's work, whom I did the remote viewing lemur skit with. I'll link it below. But yeah, Di Grazia referenced Malagna's work, and I conflated the two. My apologies. It's Malagna's holographic model of abduction that I had been referencing and that I will continue to reference because I think it makes a lot of sense. But this in-between zone sounds a lot like that space. And if that space is where these abductions take us, then that lines right up with that Jinn space. Tom says they are the NHI and aliens, or at least a lot of them. And that they had those relations with the court of Charlemagne, and that is where the chivalry comes in. So there are some that are good. There are some that want to uplift. That goes back to Tom's point saying, yeah, there actually could be a positive secret spiritual government here, because they do have seemingly very beneficial effects. In the People of the Secret, it references this time period heavily as a concentrated period of influence by the hidden group to reshape and uplift humanity. So there's connections there as well. So this path forward for humanity, starting from where we are now, is a mixing of yogic, mental thinking work, the heart-based feeling that we can be familiar with through Christianity, linking with the divine, and the free will higher self based ego refinement / subjugation to the higher divine with the Rosicrucian style work. Basically, the D&D character built out as an occult, scientist, warrior, monk. Yes. In the future, we can all aim towards being spiritually mature mech suit heroes. Tom continues by saying humanity will grow because it will be faced with challenges. These will be inflection points where we will need to grow to face these challenges. He says that there are some good forces on the other side, again, that good, positive, spiritual government, and that they act as a counterbalance to the Borg agenda. But they've got to abide by free will, and they can't interfere too overtly. I'll say it again, but go check out montalk.net. Great resource. Really appreciated the expounding upon the K-path, the Kshatriya path, and the Brahmin path convo. Brahmins are the light beam pillar builders and maintainers, and the Kshatriyas are the light beam shooters and spreaders. Fascinating discussion about the etheric tech as well. And I ended up asking him a bit more about this, and he was kind enough to respond. I wanted to, here, let me just read it for you. So I asked Tom, I'm curious and interested in what you think about this idea as it pertains to etheric connected tech. Is etheric chi orgone part of the tech more the interface all the time? Or could the etheric tech be something like servitors and tulpas and egregores as well? Or is that a different thing? And Tom responds wonderfully and with great info. Tulpas, servitors, egregores, and the etheric chi orgone are all part of the tech and are both made of the same stuff, subtle energy, which spans a spectrum that in traditional occult terms consists of etheric and sometimes also astral energy. The difference is that demiurgic tech is where the subtle energy layer is bound to a physical object, same way a plant's energy field is bound to the plant tissue. Meanwhile, a tulpa or egregore is discarnate, in a sense, usually free-roaming in the etheric and or astral plane as a semi-autonomous construct. By default, they're linked back to the human who created them, but they can also break free and bind to an inanimate object or place. The astral imbues an egregore with a semblance of volition, personality, and drives. Our own astral body produces these functions in us. An egregore or tulpa tends to be parasitical if left to its own devices, as what it wants is what it's made of, which is more energy. Hence, it seeks it from living humans. Demiurgic tech can therefore just have an etheric structure to give additional functions, like an alien ship being alive in a very basic sense, or it can also have an astral component that gives it more independence. Thus, in mythology, we hear of magical weapons like swords that had their own intelligence, or the Ark of the Covenant having a glowing energy field, the Shekinah, that could travel about and communicate, or Solomon's magical cutting stone, the Shamir, that was said to be a living stone. Awesome. Thank you, Tom. The K-path has that subtle energy manipulation training, which raises their energy, connecting them to the super-duper hypertech, working on the etheric realm. It kind of reminds me of the pilots in the Pacific Rim tuning into the drift and utilizing that non-physical space to pilot this massive mech. I have mechs on the brain for some reason, but that is what that reminded me of. And Tom talks about how both pranic and Kriya yoga practices are particular practices that the K-path might have utilized, and I wanted to read a couple of those practices here. When it comes to beginner pranayama exercises, some foundational techniques are the 3-part breath, filling the belly, then the chest, then the upper throat with air, and releasing it in a reverse order. So filling up the belly, chest, throat, releasing throat, chest, belly. Alternate nostril breathing, closing one nostril with your thumb, inhaling through the other, and switching sides to exhale. And bee breath, inhaling deeply, then making a soft, steady humming sound like a bee as you would exhale. As well as victorious breath, inhaling and exhaling through your nose while slightly tightening your throat to make a soft ocean sound. The 3-part breath is supposed to build up full lung capacity. Alternate nostril breathing is there to balance energy. Bee breath is for calming the nervous system, and victorious breath is for anchoring focus. Pretty cool. You're supposed to do this whether you're sitting tall with a straight spine on a cushion or chair. I did it laying down last night and thought it was pretty interesting. Keep your eyes closed to turn your focus inward, and stop immediately if you feel dizzy or short of breath. Along with Kriya yoga practices, there are some simple breathing postures, asanas, with breath control, pranayama, and focused awareness. But some breathing and energy exercises here for Kriya yoga. You have, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing this, I probably am, Ujjayi pranayama, Ujjayi pranayama, Breathing slowly through the nose with a soft throat constriction to create a gentle ocean sound. There's a little overlap there. Kapalbhati, which is Kaplbhati. Sit upright and exhale forcefully through your nose by pulling your belly in while letting inhalation happen naturally. We've seen those videos of the yogic masters flexing their bellies when they exhale. And then pranic energization. Focus your mind on different parts of your body one by one while taking deep breaths to direct your internal energy. I did this as well last night and felt an immediate sense of inhalation and exhalation within the physical segments that I was focusing on. It was enough to notice. Some foundational postures in Kriya Yoga. There's easy pose, Sukhasana, Sukhasana. Sit cross-legged with a straight spine to focus on steady breathing and mental quiet. The cat-cow pose. Move smoothly between arching and rounding your spine on your inhales and exhales while on your hands and knees. And child's pose, the Balasana. Rest your hips back on your heels and stretch your arms forward to relax your breath and body. Great beginner practices, I think, and worth considering and employing if you want to get on that K-path. The discussion from what the Grail actually is in terms of its etheric-based demiurgic tech given to those K-path practitioners of the time, that was cool. Tom's book Gnosis, awesome. To how we stand on a stage on the board game of this existence, and these non-physical beings are backstage or off the board, attempting to influence and shape the play as it progresses and make the pieces move in certain directions. But, as Tom says, we are also influenced directly from the divine and can take inspiration and direction from it to shape the play in a direction that's probably more beneficial for us here. Our power is our free will. We ultimately are the ones that decide which way it goes. The Paul Brunton talk was great and added more fuel to the fire when it comes to ways of readying ourselves and to widen our connection to that Overself, thereby getting that divine inspiration a little easier. There's the short path, always constantly focusing and aligning with the higher divine power, inflaming yourself with prayer. And then there's the long path, the path of deprogramming and self-mastery and watching yourself. Now, it takes a while to weed the garden, but it's a more optimal direction to combine the two, Tom says. I thought that was nice to hear. Work on yourself, check yourself, and then cultivate that spiritual warmth, that connection to communication with the Overself, the divine inspiration. The practice of tending and stoking the warmth within, that connection, cultivating that connection to the divine that Tom talked about. This was great. Take 5 minutes right when you wake up. Don't start running through all the frustrating stuff of life. Do spend that mental energy on gratitude, on looking at examples and opportunities of what wants to come through into the world through you, to garble a quote by Nate citing the GOAT Gordon White. Our subconscious is a leaf to the tree of the Demiurge, the mechanism of the reality creation system. So you're sending that info like sunlight feeding the tree. What sunlight do you want to send? This reminds me of the Archaics video that Z had pointed me towards. That's great when he talks about thinking on the thing desired as if it is already achieved as a memory. It already happened. You are dreaming about it as a past event, as it's no big deal. It's already happened. You're good. It's just, wow, wasn't that awesome? Wasn't that awesome? Yeah, it was. Living in the end, as Neville Goddard would say. Riverside did garble up the end portion, so I had to do some maneuvering around. I think I was able to get the majority of it. If you're listening, I don't think you'll notice that much. If you're watching, you'll see the captions drop out. But I think I was able to salvage just about 99.9% of it. This is a little blip that you'll see there, a little overlap, but it works out. Tom's message still gets through. Take 5 minutes. I'm going to say this again just because it was great. Take those 5 minutes and attend to anything that warms your soul, a fond memory, a future you're moving towards, a life that you want. And again, do it as if you were living it right now, or as if all that stuff that would have taken you to get there has already happened. So it's no big, you're already there. No big deal. It's just another day. It's another day in paradise. You know what I'm saying? Phil Collins? It's you and me in paradise. But you and me in paradise. Phil Collins, it's already happened. Take those 5 minutes. Look at it as a memory. Living that life right now, how would that feel? Also, Tom says, gratitude simply toward the divine. If you can't really think about anything like that, take 5 minutes, just be grateful for your oversoul hooking you up and saving you from getting in car crashes like it did to me the other day, which I really appreciate. Thank you very much. And this, Tom says, kickstarts some momentum. It builds an astral energy field around you, like a thought form shield. I like this a lot. I'm going to be running with this. That propagates for the rest of the day. It grows exponentially and gets to the point of warping reality in your favor. This is a spiritual occult principle. This is not new agey stuff. This is your shield. The sword is your discernment and your intuition that Steiner talked about training up. The sword and shield cultivated and equipped for life's adventure of fulfilling your destiny. Now that's something we can do about it. The closing of what Tom gave us also was just more gold to hold on to. Know yourself. Get in touch with who you truly are, your authenticity, to express that within the physical as much as possible. To leave no stone unturned and to make no compromises. Not having to choose between being a spiritual ascetic and a physically competent, well-off individual that doesn't have a lot of spiritual training under their belt. It doesn't have to be either or. You can do both. Maximize your potential. Know what you are not. Nurture what you actually are. Get into character. Go with your story and enjoy the story while you're in it. That was pure 24K path gold. The clear summary of the Ahriman, Luciferic, and Christ paths was also wonderful icing on top to help clarify what Steiner talks about when he talks about Ahrimanic, Luciferic, and Christ vectors of progression. It also was a great summary of everything else that he talked about throughout the episode. Check out that Twitter X space that's happening September 3rd. I'll put a link in the description. It is always a good time, and you're always coming away with more than you came in with when you listen to Tom Montalk. Well, thank you again, Tom Montalk, and thank you all for hanging. This is a pleasure, and we are truly getting to know what we can do about it. Let us begin to form our shield and sharpen our sword together. I'll catch you on the next one.